everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. My name is Brian Vitale. We've got the whole crew here today. Welcome to Josh Torres.
Welcome to me.
Welcome to you. Adam Vitale.
Hello.
James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
And Chow Min Wu.
Hello.
It is the middle of November, and that means there are a lot of new games that have come out in the last week, in the last 2 weeks, literally just yesterday at the time of recording for Pokemon, for those that didn't acquire it early. So we've got a lot of other new games to talk about. So this is probably going to be one of our most, this week and next week, will likely be some of our most heavy-hitting podcasts of the year, as November tends to be. Lots of games to talk about. We're going to kind of go through them as best as we can with a lot of the new releases, trying to, as we get to them, as we've talked in the last couple of weeks, all the crunch that we kind of feel under as we get towards the end of the year. Obviously, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet just released yesterday. So we will be heading off our podcast with that, though it's likely that as we get more time to play into the next week, we might do a part 2 next week if more people. It depends on what we look at the itinerary next week, and if we can squeeze it in.
Are you sure about that?
What's up?
Think about what's happening next weekend.
It's not the Game of the Year podcast, is it?
No. I need a hint.
It's right after Thanksgiving.
Oh, I think we recorded on that Saturday last year, though.
I don't know if I'll be in a position to.
Yeah, we don't know our schedules yet. Next weekend.
Well, I'll tell you something. I mean, I already have Thanksgiving in Canada. We celebrate it a month earlier.
Oh, look at this guy! He's got the 2000 IQ play. Just
moved to Canada. It a month earlier.
So as of right now, we have not made a decision not to have the podcast next week, but we will monitor our socials. Yeah, we'll let you know on our socials, on our Twitter and everything, if we decide to cancel. It might be just an abbreviated or a smaller cast. We'll see.
This is also on the assumption that Twitter exists by next weekend too.
That's another thing that we can't just take for granted. But anyways, let's just talk about this week. So this week we have kind of a packed podcast document here and all the games that we're going to talk about. Since we do have a lot to get through, there's a medium bit of news, and then 4 different games to talk about, and then some features up on the site on RPGsite.net. Let's just get rolling into it with the release of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So these games have, of course, been kind of all over the web for the last couple days for a lot of reasons. Not all of them great, and not most of them great. But I have not gone hands-on with Pokemon quite yet, though I do have a copy. I'm going to hand off the starting of this podcast over to James, who has been behind the scenes poking at Pokemon and writing up, his impressions and thoughts in different guides that are going up on the site, and has been, communicating in our different Discord channels about his thoughts so far in the game. So, James, I have no idea what your actual impression is, because this game has kind of been under a lot of fire over the last week, and I want to hear it just from someone who has put a lot of time into it. Basically, what is true, what is false, how is it, and all of that.
All right. So I think at a baseline, I'm just gonna say this: Pokemon Legends Arceus should have been the only Pokemon game this year.
I know a lot of us were surprised, and a lot of people were surprised when they announced Scarlet and Violet and saying that was coming this year. And we're just like, that's really soon to announce and release brand new mainline Pokemon games.
Yeah, because Legends Arceus was in a relatively good spot when it came out, and for what it's worth, it was probably my favorite Pokemon game in years. And I know that many others felt the same way, though some also were disappointed in the lack of trainer battles and whatnot. But the thing is that game could have been even better if it had to release this holiday instead of in January. But more importantly, if Scarlet and Violet had not even a full extra year in development, if they had even just a few extra months, maybe this would be in a much better spot. Because I don't have to say it, Pokemon's a big enough franchise that if you've been on social media in the last day or so, you've probably seen a number of videos about this game barely holding itself together, quite literally barely holding itself together. And even then, depending on your definition, it might just already be falling apart at the seams. Technically, this game is a mess, a complete and utter mess. The performance is all over the place. The graphical prowess, in some spaces it can look good, but there's just so much popping, there's so much flickering. The way this game handles like graphics, even for a Switch game, is very clearly under like quite a bit of stress. It's like, to put it mildly, like there is a bug that seems to be relatively common. I've seen some people that they haven't run into this, but I've run into it, and clearly so many other people have. Um, Whenever you enter any sort of indoor location, so it could be like a building, it could be the terror raid battles, it could be any number of things that are like changing the actual like location you're in that's not part of the open world. There will randomly be just a Pokeball sitting on the ground in the absolute dead center like of the location based off the game data. And once you notice that, it's impossible to stop noticing it.
Well, you might have doomed some people because if they didn't notice it before, they might not. They might now just like.
Granted, not everyone's run into this, because I was consistently running into it with terror raid battles, but before we started recording, I was mentioning how like last night I was up way too late co-hosting a stream for a buddy of mine, and I was watching his like footage, and like in the terror raid battle, like I'd see the Pokeball on the floor, but like looking at his like preview window, it's like, nope, it's not there on his end. What the fuck?
It's weird.
Yeah.
Did the game launch with like a patch to kind of fix up some of these issues?
Yes, this is with the day one patch.
Oof.
And from what we can tell, there is very much a memory leak right now, to the point where even Nintendo's own customer service is recommending that you restart the game every day.
Yeah, I mean, this is not the only game on Switch that suffers this. Like, I remember Xenoblade 3 having this as well, where they're like you just saw very noticeable performance dips, and then you'd have to restart the game every so often. So
Room Factory 5 have the same problem.
Yeah, so I mean that issue is like that doesn't surprise me. It's like that just seems to be like
par for the course of Switch.
Yeah, somewhat common thing for Switch games, which sucks.
Like,
it
even
shouldn't
Xenoblade
be,
2 had it, and I think that apparently even Breath of the Wild did, even if the performance itself didn't suffer, because like the way that game worked is that it would use the blood moons to basically refresh the memory. So it's like it's a gameplay mechanic, but really it's just an excuse for refreshing the game state.
That's funny.
And the longer you played the game, the more frequently it would occur, until eventually it was happening like every hour or so.
Okay. I didn't know that it actually would change frequency. Whenever we talk about, first of all, I have a couple of comments based on the last bit of conversation here. First of all, as someone who has been outside of the Pokesphere since like Gen 4, first of all, it just felt like to me that it felt really quick. Like maybe this is just the passage of time and getting older, but like, didn't we just get a new gen? I guess Sword and Shield just was 3 years ago. Those games released. We got some DLC, and then we're immediately on to the next gen. First of all, that felt quick. I don't know if that's like typical for gens or if it has actually been abbreviated.
Well, I think it feels quicker because of the DLC and because of Arceus, like in the gap there.
Gotcha. Because normally we would have had like a Sword 2 or a Alpha Sword or I don't know, something. And
Arceus didn't introduce like a new gen of Pokemon. It had like new regional variants of Pokemon.
Right.
Yeah.
And then like when Sword and Shield came out, those two games were also lambasted for their performance, but the scale felt different. And it kind of felt like one of those things where like us nerds, I'm saying that endearingly online, or maybe like we're hypersensitive, we're nitpicking, and the casual fan or the fan that just picks a Pokemon every year doesn't mind. But this time, it's something about this time around just feels different. I had a friend who is a kind of a more casual player and went to the midnight release. Well, I say casual, but did go to the midnight release of Pokemon, so not that casual. And even like, wow, this game is buggy, like this sort of thing where it's like, it's not the sort of thing that just flies under the radar. People are like, oh, I don't mind, that doesn't bother me. Like it, whatever. Like I'm just here to play Pokemon.
If we're like keeping track, let's say let's start like Sword and Shield as like the baseline, right? Like that game had performance issues, especially at like the park area of that game.
The wild areas too, right?
Or the wild area, yeah. People, really made a specific point of that. But like the performance issues like outside of that were, from my memory, was like fairly unstable side.
It was like a low frame rate, blurry textures, kind of stuff that we noticed, but other people who aren't in as deep, quote unquote, might not, or they notice and don't mind.
Those problems like kind of like those didn't like necessarily like permeate throughout the expansions. Like people were just like, okay, this is what it is. It's only like confined like really to this area, and the rest of the game like we can pretty much tolerate. And then
even sorry,
go for it.
And even the wild area, like it had performance issues, as in like it had frame rate dips, but it wasn't really a noticeable problem for most people unless you were playing online. Not like this. Not like this.
So we fast forward, like expansions and DLC comes out. Then we get to Pokemon Legends Arceus, and the Arceus was not like immune to this problem. Like when it launched, like people definitely did the same cycle. Like here are some videos. There are some buggy things about this game. There are some performance problems about this game. But it was like a lot of that was like, this is not really technically mainline. This is kind of a spin-off, a new formula. It's like it's a novelty sort of thing. So like it was more of like to some people it was like more like an engine test almost of like trying out this open world formula for the Pokemon series and so forth. So
and
like
people kind of use that for like the environments and stuff, where they said when the environments were first shown, like, wow, these are really kind of dated, but it's Game Freak's first go. Like there's a little bit of a boiled frog effect there, where it's like, yeah, it's Game Freak, they haven't been great at this. The environment, it's not Game Freak, right? It was or was it Game?
Yeah,
I'm trying to.
Freak.
It was the remasters that weren't Game Freak for Platinum
it's
Diamond
gonna
Pearl.
be funny when we. I'm gonna bookmark that thing you said where it's like, it's their first time doing a fully open like 3D world. Gonna be interesting to juxtapose this game with another studio's first not full open world, but open world enough RPG that also released this week that most people probably don't even know exists.
Well, we'll put that in the back of our heads. But yeah, so that Arceus, the environments people kind of criticized, and I think genuinely they were not great. But it was kind of like people let it slide because it's like, this is like Josh said, this is kind of a proven. This is not a demo, but kind of like learning the techniques, learning how we can do, like what are our capabilities, what do we want.
Yeah, almost like as a borderline proof of concept. There was a fully baked game in there, and like people seem to and enjoy that new formula for the most part. But it was still not immune. Like we saw, it was still pretty buggy. It was still had performance problems. That's well documented. When it launched earlier this year, and now as the year goes by, after Arceus comes out, here comes the Game Freak and the Pokemon Company again. Just out of nowhere, to everyone's surprise, it's like, there's a new mainline Pokemon game with new generation, Scarlet Violet. So not only are they releasing Arceus earlier this year, but they're releasing like 2 more Pokemon games, which is our main lines with the new generation, later this year. And like, of course, that will feel like that's, at the time, it felt overwhelming. It's like, that's crazy. Like, you could easily just like push these off for a few months and everyone would be fine with that, but here they are, close to the end of the year, these come out, and the results speak for themselves, both in the reviews it's gotten and all the all the footage that people have gotten, whether they're using the inbuilt
screenshots
system, screenshots, taking videos like with their capture cards, and so forth. And it's just like I wonder, like I played a very, very tiny amount of Scarlet. Like I have played a little bit about it because I'm kind of curious to see like this new open world structure that they're messing with for a mainline. But I to me it's like, okay,
actually,
there's a lot of bugs for sure, and some of them are really fucking hilarious, like the Golduck walking through like the air. Like that one was like, okay, that's pretty funny. But it's like, is there like an enjoyable game like beyond it all? That's what I'm curious about.
Were you gonna say something, James?
Because I know one of the features of this game is like it's pretty like non-linear in terms of progression, because you have like these 3 main paths to pursue in this Pokemon. Like you have like the standard like gym leader path. Yeah, now you have like this rival gang that you can pursue. And then you have like another one that's like an archaeological sort of angle to like find these like Titan Pokemon or something like that. So like,
I see
is
what
it
James
fun?
is trying to do here.
So
Just
like, is
kind
it
of
fun?
showing an example of performance.
All right, so James is sharing. Well, we won't be able to show this on the podcast, obviously, but he's just
This is an
showing.
audio
He's just
podcast. I
showing
don't
us.
even know what the hell like is going on with you guys. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Like
he's
James
just
like
showing
started up
some.
like a live stream on Discord during this thing, but like for the purposes of an audio
Here we
podcast,
go.
like is this a fun game?
Yeah, it's a fun game. Like despite all of the issues, it's like so with everyone I've been playing the game with over the last like day or so, the one thing that we keep coming back to is that it's such a shame that these performance issues are here. Because even like the presentation stuff, whatever, it could be better, it should be better, but most people they don't actually care too much about that.
And that's kind of where Sword
Though,
and Shield were.
yeah, but the performance issues have gotten to the point where even non like gamers and a lot of non-gamers play Pokemon. In fact, I'd say most people that play Pokemon aren't really like massive gamers.
Just to make sure that we're careful with our wording. If they play Pokemon, they are gamers, but like that's their one big release of the year that they really look forward
that's
to.
What I'm. Yeah, that's what I meant. It's like not that they.
This is their jam. They line up every year.
It's kind of like like people who only play one game per year, and that's like the yearly Madden game. Like that doesn't make them like not gamers. It's like they they have their habits. They know what they like. Yeah,
for casual normies. Let's just say that.
But yeah, the game itself, if it wasn't for the performance issues, this would probably be it's already, even with the performance issues, people are saying this is possibly the best Pokemon game in a long, long time, and I agree with that. Like,
all right, let's be optimists. Yeah, let's be optimists, and let's dig into that. So, James, obviously, you've out of all of us here have been able to put the most time into Scarlet and Violet. We've kind of
put 27 hours into it so far.
Oh wow, yep, for sure. Then, so we've kind of covered that it hasn't released in a great state, and we don't know exactly what sort of follow-up support the game will get in terms of potentially fixing these if they are mostly caused by memory leaks. It seems like that's the case, but we don't know for certain. But let's just focus on the positive. So you just started that this game has a lot going for it on a gameplay front. So let's dig into that. In your time with the game, like how, for those of us that are fringe Pokemon or have not been Pokemon fans for a while, like what does Scarlet and Violet do well in your first couple dozen hours with the game?
Well, first off, like my main issue that I had with Sword and Shield, and I know a couple of other people at least had this same thought, was it was like, even though you had the wild area, which meant that you could kind of choose what type of Pokemon you caught, and like there was a lot of freedom for what teams you could use. Outside of the wild area, the entirety of Sword and Shield was just completely handheld. Like in earlier Pokemon games, like obviously it was like very linear, but there was still like routes that you could explore that were off the beaten path that you did not have to go through, or you could completely ignore. Like in Gen 3, you had the Shoal Cave or the upper portion of the Meteor Falls. I forget the exact name of that location. And Gen 2, you had all sorts of different routes you could explore, or like different like exits to caves and whatnot. Gen 4, you had like entire routes, and you had like all the different like legendary Pokemon you could find in the post game and whatnot. And Gen 8 was beyond all the other issues people had with like the Pokedex cut and like the like presentation and performance. I know a lot of like Pokemon fans were just disappointed because to them, what Pokemon was a bit of that exploration and being able to discover things on your own. And they kind of just didn't have that option with Sword and Shield or Gen 8 in general, which was part of the reason I loved Legends Arceus, because it kind of brought that back. It wasn't fully open world, but it had like the open zones, or all really big on their own right. And then it was just like kind of freeform. You
had a narrative, but you had side objectives and things like that.
Yeah, though funnily enough, I'd say that Legend Arceus's narrative was one of the better ones in Pokemon. Not that that's saying too much.
Yeah, it was all right for what it was. I know, I think someone in here, we were talking, obviously, when Pokemon released, we had a lot of chat, just like on our Discord, both on the staff side and on the public side, about people's history with the series or whatever. I think it was Adam saying, like, he tried playing, was it Ultra Sun? And just, like, couldn't stand the amount of dialogue and narrative in that game. Just a lot of chatter. And Arceus had some of that, but just Sun, just DS Sun. But yeah, Arceus, or not, that was 3DS, right? Yeah. But then Arceus had some of that, but it had plenty of times where it just kind of like shut up and let you play, as we like to say sometimes. And that was, I talked about how I hadn't played Pokemon since Gen 4, but I did play Arceus. So it's kind of interesting to think of a hypothetical universe where we had the Diamond and Pearl remakes last November, and then we got Arceus this November, because Arceus scored fairly well. And I know scores and everything, but it was just generally received as like an interesting experiment. It had some shortcomings, but generally favorably received. And it's interesting to think about, like, what if Arceus had another half year of polish, and then Gen 4, or sorry, why did I say 4? Gen 9 would be a next year thing, and we avoided all these issues. It's interesting to think about. We will never know for certain, like, why the decision was made to release all these games on such a rapid cadence. But I guess I guess I'm catching myself getting kind of back into the pessimism. But James, you were setting yourself up to basically say that it seems like Scarlet and Violet do manage to present its narrative in an interesting way and give you some freedom in what you're able to do.
Well, I didn't say narrative per se, but the gameplay wise, it's very it's like very wide open, very fresh and free. This game's world is absolutely massive. Like, it's like, I knew obviously, like, open world, it's going to be big, but I did not really anticipate it to be this big. And there's
but what I do like about this game, because I tried out Legend Arceus for a few hours back then, and I kind of got bored with it. But what I do like about Scarlet and Violet over Arceus is, like, everything is like seamless open world, not like like segmented zones. Like Arceus, like, for me, that was enough to be like, I'm not really like it wants to present itself as an open world, but actually isn't an open world in Arceus. While this one just really goes for it, and like you get like your like the legendary Pokemon vehicle like fairly early on to just like let you go wild with it and kind of explore at your leisure almost.
Yeah,
and there's like nothing, and like when you enter a town, you're not like going through like a zone barrier to like phase into town. You're just there.
I was actually going to ask about that. Like, town, there's no transition, there's no load. You just arrive.
Yeah, because
okay,
to be honest, like, I kind of was anticipating this after the Sword and Shield DLC, and part of the reason, like, despite, like, to be completely clear here, I was very down on Sword and Shield when it first came out. I believe our review is like one of like 2 or 3 on Metacritic that were a 6 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've been on record stating that basically it was the DLC and the post-launch support that shifted your opinion on that game as a whole product.
Yeah, and I'll keep saying, like, all credit to Nintendo. Despite us having a middling review for Sword and Shield's base game, they did ultimately send expansion pass code to us. So, like, they knew that there was something to show for with the DLC there. And but yeah, like, a lot of Scarlet and Violet's DNA can be found in especially the Crown Tundra in the Sword and Shield DLC. Because even if that wasn't a fully open world, a lot of what Scarlet and Violet ultimately does, you can see the blueprints being drawn with that DLC. Because there's a town, a small town, but a town nonetheless. It's just plopped in a wild area. There's NPCs, there's side quests, there's like several different paths you can follow. And then there's even stuff like, oh, there's these cave networks that are just built into the wild area with like twists and turns, and are all seamless. And it's like very clear that, okay, so they wanted to be able to do more in-depth routes and make a more open world with the next game. And they wanted to do something more smaller in scope so they could get more used to the idea and get the tech starting to work there. And like, despite the performance issues here, I want to say, like, I think that the density of these environments is really impressive. Like, there's Pokemon everywhere. They're not just standing around. They're like actually interacting with the environment to a degree that even like Legends Arceus didn't really do.
Yeah, like, I saw like a clip of a streamer like navigating like this rainy, windy environment in Scarlet Violet, and you saw like Pokemon like being flown into by the wind because like the wind was that strong, and like I don't know if that's a bug, if that's intended behavior, but like I'm like that's cool, that makes the world feel more alive and like interactive. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it looked crazy.
Yeah, and then it's like if you're like going on the open water and you're like waiting around, you'll sometimes see like Psyducks in the water, and they'll just be lying on their back snoozing as they're like literally floating down a river or something.
Yeah, and that's neat. And like there was even like one that's like it was clearly like meant to be a bug showcase, but I found it funny and like in a really like amusing positive way where the battle was initiated and like in Legends Arceus when battles are initiated, it's like all in the field. It doesn't like phase into like a specific arena or battle arena or anything. So there was this one battle where someone got their Fuecoco, the fire starter, out against like this Magikarp that's like in the water. I don't know if it's a Magikarp or it was like another Pokemon. But like that when their Pokeball went out, like the Fuecoco was like in the water and like just sunk into like the bottom of the water, the body of water, and then you just saw the other Pokemon just like slowly look down at it as it sinks to the bottom. And I'm like, that's funny as hell.
Just reminds me of like whenever you step off a ledge in Dark Souls accidentally into water, and it's just like just thinking somebody doing it out of that and just like having the you died
Fuecoco died.
Yeah, and like those are like that's the kind of stuff that like sure like people will say, oh, that's like that's
it's
a bug, that's like that's
degree.
unintended behavior, but that's like really funny. It's like that makes the environment like matter in a way that like people didn't intend it to be, but I wish they kind of leaned more into that.
Yeah, like I think where I've landed specifically is that this game is a technical mess. I've been able to overcome it because I enjoy the gameplay loop enough, and I do see the vision. I do think that underneath all the bugs, I think a lot of people are kind of not doing the game enough credit for just how ambitious it actually is. Because it's like a lot of these performance issues are definitely CPU bottleneck related, and I can understand why, because so much is actually happening in the open world with Pokemon and whatnot, and asset streaming and all that. It's like it's one of those things where it's just like the performance sucks. Not gonna sugarcoat it any two ways, but it's one of those things where if you know even a little bit about like the Switch's hardware and like what this game is doing, and then you like look around, it's like I can see why it's struggling. It's like it makes sense.
Well, have you tried out the co-op
yes
mode of this? So how is the co-op in this? Because one of the big features they announced early for this these games is like you can have up to 4 players co-op, and they can go like any direction to explore the open world if they want to explore together or go split off on their own and whatever. How is that holding up?
So there are limitations to the co-op. You can't like join another person's like wild Pokemon battle or anything like that. But it is very seamless. And one thing that's I think very important for a lot of people is that when you join someone else's co-op session or world for a co-op session, you don't have to worry about not being able to progress your story. Like you can anyone in a co-op session, you can have 4 different people doing 4 different things in their individual stories completely seamlessly, no problems whatsoever.
That's actually really cool, and like that's kind of, I think that's like one of like the hidden big features of that game of this game, and like one of the biggest strengths. It's like I know we've seen it a lot before with like other games with like co-op where they have to like make a co-op room or co-op session, and then there are like certain limitations, like only the host can do this, only the host can progress story, only the host can do that, and you're like more of like a kind of like in the passenger seat, can't really do things on your own. But like hearing that, like that's really really cool. That like, I assume like this, like these set of games are like going to be like a big like, just like communication hub for people to just like hang out together. It's like, hey, you wanna play Pokemon, and sure, like, and they're just like maybe they're just doing their own thing, just like enjoying each other's company while they're just like doing their own thing in Pokemon, but together in the same world, and that's really really cool.
And it's like the moment, like especially last night, that really stood out to me is like 4 of us were just going different directions, doing different things. We found a really, really weird Pokemon, and then just all of a sudden we meet up, and it's like we're like, okay, let's show each other what we caught. And then it's like this. I guess spoiler warning for a very early Pokemon, if we want to put this in the podcast, like just to say, Buddy throws out Toadschool, which is a not regional variant, but more like a regional cousin of Tentacle, where instead of it being like a squid, it's like a weird mushroom plant thing that stands on 2 legs, and it's just like the funniest fucking thing I've ever seen. And then you throw it out, and it's like, okay, it looks funny because it's like standing on its tentacles like legs, and then you start moving, it starts moving with you, and it's like flailing its tentacle legs, running after you at a really high speed. Then you read the Pokedex, and it's like, oh yeah, this thing can run up to 30 miles per hour.
Holy shit.
and everyone was just laughing their ass off.
Yeah, but I imagine think about how this will be great for friend groups, friend circles, especially for younger kids. It's like, you and you have some buddies from school. It's like, hey, after school, let's go play some Pokemon together, and that's just easy now, and just something you get to do together, and that's awesome.
Yeah. And it's that's awesome. There's this legendary hunt where it's even early on you can kind of see them in the environment where there's these stakes in the ground, and each region has 8 of these colored stakes, and if you find all of them, then you can unlock a gate to try and catch a legendary Pokemon. It's that's another thing you can do in co-op. It's you can just have people scour the environment for these individual stakes, and it's hey, I found one over here. It's hey, I found one over there. And it's you're just kind of, it's one of those things where it's there's not too much hard baked into the game design about the co-op. It's very hands off, but it's because it's hands off and because it lets you just play the game normally, just as if you're offline playing a single player, there's a lot you can do with a friend group there to just make your own gameplay there. And it works really, really well.
How does the battle system work when it comes to multiple people in the same set? Can they join each other's battles?
No.
Okay.
You can only join each other's battles for raid battles.
Okay.
And the way it works if you're in a co-op session is you need to basically somebody there's a bunch of different raid dens all over the world, but specific ones will be tied to different people. So maybe one raid den will be tied to the host, maybe one will be tied to let's say hypothetically me or another person or the fourth. And you find a raid den, and it's okay, you can tell what type of Terra type it is by the color of the raid den. It's funny because I'm looking at these, and it's these look exactly like the monster dens from Monster Stories 2.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, actually. Yeah.
But so yeah, you can see these, and it's okay, so there's this thing that's a Terra type that's water or fire, and it's I kind of want to see what it is, but it's not my raid den, so I'm gonna call my buddy over who this is their raid den. We can see what it is and see if we want to tackle it and try and grab this Pokemon for a party and whatnot. And it's it's a very seamless experience. It feels good, and credit where credit is due. The performance does not get worse in co-op.
Hooray!
There you go.
The way you describe this, though, it's kind of so obviously Arceus kind of set up a lot of the groundwork for a more open world Pokemon game, but was single player. And it seems like one of the big marketing selling point aspects of this game was the 4-player co-op, and it sounds like you have only good things to say about it. So it kind of now I'm just kind of thinking of this is this a proven of basically this will pay dividends down the road for future Pokemon games where now they've got this system kind of worked out, they've got kind of the framework identified about how co-op can work in a Pokemon game that has an open world setting to it.
The one thing I'll say, and I guess there's no guarantee that this game will get DLC or a third game or whatever, because X and Y didn't, so who knows? Mm-hmm. But I'm pretty sure this game will get some sort of DLC. Whether what the scope of it is, who knows? People have noticed that if you look at the world map and you look at the upper right corner, it's there's an area that's shaded off in the upper right corner, and then you think, this is Pokemon Spain. We already had Pokemon France. Who knows? But and then people also noticed that some of the Generation 6 Pokemon that, again, Pokemon France, seem to have gotten a lot of extra TLC with this game, so who knows what's up there. But regardless of what the DLC is or if it happens or whatnot, this game is going to get patched. No doubt about it. Especially if it gets like DLC, they're going to improve the performance over time. I assume it's going to be like Sword and Shield, where it's like the third version will instead just be updates, DLC, that sort of thing. And there are some like Pokemon that we know that aren't in the game yet, but are probably going to be added with updates or DLC, whatever, down the road. So right now, the performance is rough. You can't, I feel like most people can get over it eventually, but it's definitely not great. But if you're a Pokemon fan, or even if you're Labs, like maybe you did not like jive with Sword and Shield, much like I didn't. This is really, really a breath of fresh air. And it's, if it wasn't for the very unfortunate performance issues, there's no doubt in my mind that the conversation around this game would be about how it's like a massive return to form and like a massive change as far as everything about the formula goes.
I hate to keep going back to this, but the way you described all the potential that it has and had and has, just like, man, what if they had another year to work on this? You know,
Yeah.
it seems like their ideas are great. The the vision that they have is solid. You know, the progression of the well-worn systems and bringing it into like a new era is good. It's just that the execution was crunched, like both literally and just like, for some reason we got to get 2 big games out this year, the Arceus and the new gen. So therefore we all have to suffer for it and see what could have been, in a way.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something, Chow?
I was going to say, good luck with that. I mean, don't they pump out a Pokemon game every year, regardless of the circumstances?
Well, we talked about how they did the DLC instead. So it's ever since Gen 8, it's been either a game or a major DLC.
I'm trying to think when was the last time they skipped a year, and I think they might have skipped a year between Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, and Sun and Moon. I think.
Like, I have never seen a Pokemon game being delayed to improve performance issues. It's all about the bucks, so it's rip for this game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I do know that like back in the day, like Diamond and Pearl got delayed. Which
You're
is
right.
why they had the like additional like season of the anime that was about like the battle frontier and like Emerald or whatnot, because they needed like filler. And that's also why a bunch of like spin-off games and whatnot had like little teaser Pokemon for Gen 4, like with Munchlax and Bonsly. So it's like it's happened before, and I feel like if any year should have had a delay, it probably should have been this year, because they already released the Pokemon game. Arceus sold over 15 million copies. They did not need to release this now, even if it's going to sell like 20 million.
And you're right, Alpha Ruby, like they're apparently in 2015. Yes, I'm on Wikipedia and educating myself. Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire 2014, Sun and Moon 2016. 2015, we got some games like Super Mystery Dungeon and things like that.
Yeah.
So just some spin-offs. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this game can get some post-launch support, not in terms of DLC, because I'm sure we'll get that, but in terms of hopefully we can look through the rear view mirror by the end of the year or so and be like, man, remember the state that Scarlet and Violet launched in? Good thing it got fixed or whatever. Like, we can only hope and dream.
Did they ever improve Sword and Shield on the base game?
The wild areas never really got improved now.
So it's not a good precedent.
But also the problems with this game's performance and like glitchiness overall is like it, like Sword and Shield's performance, most people are able to ignore. This game's performance, glaringly obvious. I feel like there's a much better chance this gets fixed than what happened with Sword and Shield.
Who is your favorite? I want to be cognizant of spoiling people, but an early new Pokemon that you put on your team, like who's your early newcomer that you've really enjoyed like using and having around?
I really enjoyed Tinkatink, which is a Steel Fairy type. It's really cute, and it's also got like an interesting typing. I know we've had like Fairy Steel types in the past, but none that were really explicitly like a frontline attacker. Like you had ones that were like support like Klefki and weren't exactly great. But Just a really neat like evolutionary line that has good designs, good stats, and just seems like a great time. But honestly, most of the new Pokemon this one have been really good.
I'm to me, even though fairy type has been around a while, I still think of fairy type as like new.
Been
I
around for
forget what.
almost a decade.
Oh
I,
Jesus
I still think
Christ!
about the fairy type as like a foreign thing to me too. I'm like, yeah, man,
I
Pokemon
forget.
typing sure are crazy these days.
Yeah,
I still have that phase.
I forget what Pokemon it was. The one of the man, my memory just stinks now. When my main team on Arceus, I forget if I had a fairy type Pokemon or if I just had a Pokemon with a fairy type move. But I was like, wow, like this move is amazing. Like it's good against dragon and or whatever else it was. I don't remember the details, but like I still think of fairy type as like the weird mystery like add-on. Like, oh, like this is a thing now. There's this thing that you have to actually account for and actually is really good, to have on your team.
Yeah, it was very funny because it was explicitly added in Generation 6 because Gen 5 was just absolutely swamped with dragon type Pokemon in the meta. So they were like, we need to do something about this.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing your initial impressions on Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Whether or not we get a chance to talk about it next week or if it won't be until the end of the year, I do know that we have a few people that are at least looking to, if not play this themselves, just kind of keep tabs on it because, Pokemon new generation releases are always kind of an event. And just to see what people's ending thoughts are, how significant the long-term, impressions are affected due to the unfortunate performance issues are, and whether or not that ultimately kind of leaves, an impact on this game's overall reception as we move forward into Generation 9 of Pokemon. And now the second game that we've got listed here for our podcast document is like, this is probably the most complete 180 that we can do within a genre-based site for game discussions on our roster. So another release that is, Josh, I'm going to have to punt this to you. You are going to talk about Midnight Suns to us. Now, is this game released just yet? I thought this was a December release, but
So
you've got
this is an early December release, but we have but I got code for the full game, and then the embargo on there's one of the embargoes is the general impressions embargo, which which did lift earlier this week, and you can talk about everything you've played up to a certain story point, which I haven't got reached yet. So I can talk about like the whole about 9 to 9.5 hours I've played of it so far, because I haven't reached that yet.
I'm just gonna say, like, before you even start talking about it, the fact that they sent out code so early and allowed people to start talking about their impressions so early, just that's one of those things where it's like they have a lot of confidence in this, and it makes me kind of like perk my eyebrows up a bit and be like, huh, I wonder.
It's a really interesting game. So for people who don't know, this is Marvel's Midnight Suns. This is the Marvel game that is being developed by the XCOM developers for Axis. So this is kind of for a lot of tactical RPG fans. This is kind of on their radar if they like XCOM. This is like we've talked about this when Scott went to like a preview event, and we had he wrote up a preview. He did a video preview. So that's why I didn't really type up anything for the site because it'd be redundant. But but I'm starting to dig into this now and going beyond what we've seen so far and so forth. And I think it's a really interesting game. It's we have to say time and time again, this is not Marvel but with XCOM. There's definitely a departure from the XCOM formula. This is more along the lines of something like a Slay the Spire-esque type of game because it is very card-based, deck building based. You do have the tactical DNA of an XCOM in here, but the way it operates is not like XCOM when it comes to engaging with the battle system. So the general storyline setup that they've talked about in this game, it's like you create your own main character in this game. Your main character is the child of the main antagonist, Lilith. Hydra has resurrected Lilith and is wreaking havoc on the world. And the only way the Avengers and the Midnight Suns groups can combat her is by resurrecting your OC. So you can have a male or female OC. You have some options that you can tinker around to customize them and make them look really, really goofy. Like this game's hair options is really something else. Everything is Look, there are some really wild hair options in this game, and of course, my character looks like an absolute dork, and it's like a kind of a late '90s. I don't know how to describe it. I'll probably show pictures like when the review goes live and stuff. It's wild what you can do with your character here, but a lot of the I think the first thing I want to mention is the game has a lot of onboarding. Like your first 4 to 4.5 hours is a lot of introduction and tutorials because like this is also catering to people who are totally disengaged from Marvel. So you have to kind of go like they kind of do like the ground of like, okay, what is the Avengers? What are the Midnight Suns? Who are these characters? Who is Blade? Who is Nico Minoru? Who is Magic? Who and you kind of get clued in on like Iron Man and Doctor Strange early on and so forth. But there's a lot of like kind of establishing like the groundwork for those people who don't necessarily know these superheroes from there, and you kind of and you go and your main character serves as that like they have this like the kind of the ideal narrative structure and reason for that of like, hey, you have this OC character, they don't know any of these superheroes, they don't know what's been going on for the past 3 centuries since they were last like active. So you kind of get clued in on that. You gotta kind of get clued in on like, okay, how does the battle system work, and how does like this whole Abbey home base work. Like I think one of the things that really caught me off guard is like, sure, you have this new battle system, and they teach you that like one of the first things you do when you start at the game is like you get a battle tutorial on like how does the card system work. And it's fairly simple in terms of like how you interact with it. Basically, you can have up to 3 characters in battle. Your main character does not have to always be one of the 3. There are like general missions and story missions. In story missions, your OC main character has to be one of those characters. But for the other like mission type, like the general missions that aren't story missions, you can just have like 3 Marvel superheroes, whoever you want, deployed on there. Each of the 3 characters that you deploy have 8 cards on them, so you're working with a maximum deck size of 24. When your turn starts, you have certain limitations. You have 3 card plays, so you can only play 3 cards, but there are stipulations to this. Like there are these cards called quick cards, like you'll know them by just their name, like Quick Slash or Quick or Quick Blast or like Quick. It'll say Quick and then something else. And then if you KO an opponent with this quick card, it will not consume a card play. So there are ways to manipulate the system so you're not confined to only always play 3 cards, and that's that. You can fiddle around with like the system in that sort of way where you can like kind of get the most actions out of your turn in the most efficient way possible, in the sense that like you're trying to disable opponents, take out opponents, try to limit the opponent's actions as much as you can before they get their turn, because they hurt. Like their damage numbers are no joke. Like at the beginning of the game, you're only confined to the normal difficulty, but as you play, you're unlocking higher difficulty levels, and these difficulty levels are basically good because you get more resources out of like missions, you get more experience. But as the trade-off is, enemies do get harder. So I'm like playing on the difficulty above normal now, which is like heroic 1, and enemies like really start hurting at this difficulty. So I'm really like pushed to like think about like, how do I get the most out of this turn so my incoming damage in the next enemy's turn is like as minimal as possible. So outside of those limitations, the 3 card turns, you have 2 redraws, in the sense that if there are a certain card that you can't like do anything with at that time, you can actually like swap it out and like draw a new card for it. This redraw mechanic does like interact with certain character abilities. Like Iron Man, for example, has cards where they will gain an additional effect if you redraw them, so you don't necessarily like replace some of Iron Man's cards. You just gain additional effects. And then there's also a limitation of like one move per turn, in the sense that you can only move one of your characters in their positions manually, because like moving around in like the battlefield is very, very, very beneficial, because there are some moves that knock back enemies. So depending on your position, you can like kind of almost like, it's almost like bowling, where you can like use an ability and think of like the enemy that you hit as like a bowling ball, and like you can like knock them to another enemy. In that sense, you can also use like that move function to kind of line up certain abilities that might like go like in a certain like angle or in a straight line. So you like maybe want to like manually position a character to fully utilize their ability that'll hit like a lot of enemies in that trajectory. So that's why they limit that move function like to only one move per turn, because that like being able to manually move a character is like already a very powerful tool in that certain aspect. And so throughout these battles, like as you play cards, some of them will earn this heroism resource, which you can use to activate like other cards that are like more powerful or have more powerful utilizations to them. You can also use this heroism resource that you build up to interact with the environment. So say like you could like there's like a big trash can that you can throw over to an opponent. Like to use that, you would need like one heroism, but that does not like consume like a card play. So that's another way you can like get more actions and damage out of your turn without having to be confined to the card play mechanic. You can like use like that resource instead, as long as you have it. So it's a good like interesting like tug of war you have between like what your limitations are in combat and what your combat options are in battle, and they're and like in the ways that like the game has like very, very varied objectives to let you play around with that. So like there'll be like maybe an objective. It's like, hey, there's a civilian. So you might have to like you might have like a rescue civilian card for that mission, or that'll consume a card play. So you have to like take into account. Okay, I can only do these actions because I want to save that civilian before before this corrupted venom like throws a boulder at them and kills them. You know, stuff like that to consider, or like this Hydra chopper is gonna lift off in 3 turns. How do I make it so I'm like minimizing the damage that I'm intaking while trying to make a concentrated effort to take down this chopper before it lifts off? So there's like a lot of like varied scenarios that really, really push you to think very tactically about like about like your capabilities and what you're able to do without having to sacrifice that many characters to do it. Like even when a character falls in battle, like that's not it for them. They're not like permadeath or anything. You can like resurrect them um with on certain difficulties. So like on normal and like heroic, like I think in normal you can like resurrect them 2 times. And heroic you only resurrect them once, and then like higher difficulties they won't let you res at all.
Yeah.
So it's kind of really just pushing you to think about like how do I really like get the most out of like each of my turns and each action.
So I have
And-
2 comments based on
Go
what
for it.
you've discussed so far. Now, one of these is pretty benign, but the other
Yeah.
one I almost feel scared to say. The benign
Okay.
one is when you talk about, so I'm not an XCOM expert, but I did play and beat, I forget which one came first, Enemy Unknown or Enemy Within. Whichever
Enemy
one came out
Unknown.
first, I did
Mhm.
play and beat that. So not several times, only played it through it once. So I have played that. And the positioning that you've talked about, where positioning is important, and then the game realizes it's important, so they limit how often you can do it. To me, that feels, at least philosophically, very XCOM like. But then the second thing I want to comment on is you talked about how I think that, some people will think like it's 2022, turn-based games are archaic. Anything that has any sort of turn shouldn't exist anymore. But I do think that turn-based games in general, or round-based or whatever other variant, there's a lot you can do with manipulation of turns, or trying to like have additional mechanics that will alter how many turns you get or how many turns your enemy get. And whether that's like something that is like, I'm going to pull up a few examples here. Like Fey Tactics was a strategy RPG, an indie one that came out in like 2019, where it's a purely turn-based, but you would also be able to cast spells at any time. So there's basically a way you can manipulate it that way. Or this is the part I was scared to say, Shin Megami Tensei, I've only played 5, and I know I'm in a room of people who have been experts of that series. Just the weakness mechanic on that game, where you want to maximize the number of abilities. You talked about how dangerous the enemies are in Midnight Suns, and in Shin Megami Tensei 5, if you're not minimizing how often the enemy gets to act relative to your actions, you're going to have a rough time. So you have to have good composition in terms of like being able to, in that game specifically, hit weaknesses or cover resistances or things like that. So I just think the hallmark of a good game based on a turn-based system is giving the player good, clever, interesting, well-designed ways in order to tilt the odds in their favor. If it's one turn for you versus one turn for the enemy always, and you can never change it, that can be a little bit boring and flat and not interesting. So it sounds like Midnight Suns does a bit to kind of keep the player engaged and give them like, yeah, here's how the fundamentals work, but we also give you these tools in your arsenal in order to like tilt things in your favor based on what the needs of the specific battle are or whatever.
Yeah, it's really very like all the heroes I've played so far have very, very like different sorts of like move sets and things that they specialize in. Very clear pros and cons of them. Like for example, Magic, she's a swordswoman, magic swordswoman that can open portals with her magic sword. So one of her like hallmark features is she has cards where she can open up portals, and you can manipulate like when you open up a portal, you can manipulate the trajectory of like when she uses like a knockback skill. Instead of like knocking back to like where they normally would go, like in normal physics, instead like when she knocks back, she knocks them into like an active portal, and you manipulate the trajectory from there where they go. So like one of like environments I was in was like, hey, I'm on top of a building. There's like an open gap in the building where I can fling them off. So I open a portal that faces out of the building, and enemies that I knock into the portal, they have a chance to just instantly die because they got flung off the building. Another thing that is like unique for a character is Nico Minoru has like this staff that she can't really control, so she's kind of like the roulette character, where a lot of her cards are like, this card when you activate it, you can do this or this. So like one of her spells is like, this spell does a lot of damage. It's 40 points of damage, but you cannot control who it targets. And if it KOs its target, it will do a second cast for free right there and then. And that's really interesting to think about, of like how to manipulate that, like the weird like strengths of these characters, of like there's like very unvarying conditions and circumstances in the environment. Like what I really like is Ghost Rider, where he can actually like open like a portal to hell, like a hole to hell, and he has like an ability to like not like he can create a hole, like an environmental hole to like fling characters into, and they have a chance to like just like fall in as well. And he also has like a super powerful card where like he uses his motorcycle to run it over like a lot of enemies in a straight line that deals a ton of damage, but the trade-off to it is it discards your whole hand as well when you use it. So it's just a lot of interesting like trade-offs that like are very in the spirit of the characters, of like there's like a good representation of their powers, and there's like an interesting way that they're utilizing it. Like Blade, he has like really great like offensive cards. It has like life steal, and has a lot of like ways to cause his enemies to like inflict the bleed status. And then once they're in bleed status, he has other cards that can proc off of that and take advantage off of that, which is very in the spirit of Blade, a vampire hunter in that aspect. So I think like the battle system and like the tactics of it are actually really compelling and interesting to play. The thing that I'm like kind of mixed on on this aspect is the one aspect and one half of the game is all that like tactics, interesting ways to engage with the battle system, etc. The other is like this abbey home base where your home base is like this abbey on an island that's like in another dimension. And like so like there's this whole island and then like this abbey and like the size of this like island is like bigger than you would imagine. It's like and it's fully explorable. It's kind of funny because when you're like running around in this like kind of casual like home base area, like your running animation like reminds you of like fucking Shepard from Mass Effect strolling around with this like kind of like jog almost. And a lot of like the tutorials you get early on in this game is like kind of double down like you spend more time engaging with tutorials of like the Abbey stuff more so than like the battle system stuff. And a lot of this is like kind of building upon like this original storyline for this original character. Like there's like a lot of lore and a lot of collectibles and a lot of journals to kind of like really flesh out like the setting and like where this character comes from and like all the mythos that surrounding Lilith and like in this character called the Caretaker and like and it's sort of like these characters' past and what happened to them because there's like a lot of like intimate storyline being like the son of like son of a woman or son or daughter of a woman depending on your original character of a woman who has now turned into a demon, now possessed by a demon, and now you have like this and Caretaker is like as her like name implies, like she was the one that took you in after like you kind of had this falling out with your mom and like in this island with the Abbey where like the that she's been tending to, there's like it holds all sorts of secrets. And so
I just gotta say, like, sorry to talk over you, but I really want to get this in. Like when you were talking about the different characters, like how their arsenal, their deck, so to speak, is like themed to something that makes sense of the character. Talking about a lot of like team building and composition aspects, a lot of things that Adam specifically tends to like call out when he plays like dungeon RPGs or things like that or CRPGs, making like a good team that really synergizes well and like tinkering and those are like micromanaging. That sounds like to me that like sings to me. But then right before you got into it, I'm like, too bad the game just seems kind of, sorry to be so judgmental, but like bland. And I remember like some of the early marketing of this game, I remember they put like a lot of focus on this Abbey thing, and they're like, this is the first Marvel experience where you have an original character and you get to learn about the history of all of your allies. And I'm just like, who is this for? Like, not to besmirch people's, what they like or don't like, but it just, I have a hard time finding that compelling where it's like, oh, I get to learn about how Blade feels about some thing and read his journal. Like to me, I'm just like, can we just get to the good stuff? I don't know. Like when the way you're describing all this Abbey stuff, that's kind of what's going on.
Yeah, like another component is like a lot of like hanging out with like the characters, as they're chilling out at the Abbey too. So, like, I mean, not all of it is bad, like reading a book by the fire with Blade and like kind of just like hanging out with him and like they kind of like clown out, like they kind of do like that Marvel like wink at the audience, like kind of dialogue of like kind of acknowledging like the Blade movies and like think about like would you ever star in a movie Blade? Like, what would you like to do in that movie? What would you call it? Maybe like Blade is just okay, and stuff like that.
Do they actually do that?
They actually do that, like in that.
Okay, that's good. All right, I'll give them that.
Yeah, like some of those like pretty like amusing. Like I'll give them that too. Like a lot of characterizations are like actually pretty fun. Like Nico Minoru is like she's such a sweetheart. Like in this game, like I really like her the way that they depict her character because like a lot of that character is like like trying to fit in with the group. Because like from your character's perspective, like you're very much an outsider at first. You're kind of like, oh, there's like this fucking legendary hunter that like existed 3 centuries ago that like combated Lilith, and like everyone's kind of like looking like, oh, I don't know about this guy. And Nico's like tried her best, like have you like fit in with the group, and she kind of like the way that like kind of they how the voice actress like delivers her lines along with the facial animation and the tone, the way they convey it is like it's pretty. It's like a very earnest effort to like make that character like very very like relatable in that aspect, which is I admire like that stuff. And I think a lot of the hangout stuff is like works for me. I think I do like that aspect of like just that downtime in between missions of like just being able to like kind of chill with the group. Like I didn't think I would like it, but like as time has gone on, like they really earned my respect for it. They're like, oh yeah, this is all right. This is all right. This is nice. But I think a lot of the other stuff I was talking about, like exploring the island and the abbey, like there's this sort of whole thing, kind of like a Metroid S thing, where you gain these words of power, like runes almost, where there are like inaccessible areas on this island that you cannot get to unless you like find like the appropriate words of power to like make a platform show up so you can like travel over there and see what's over there. And like and they emphasize after the story, like all of this is optional, you can do it at your own pace, you don't have to engage with it if you don't want to. But it almost feels like a check mark that they had to do for like game events. Like, okay, this feature has to be in no matter what. It feels like almost like a checklist that they adhered to for that part of the game. That like there's like I shit you not, there's like 4 different types of journals in this game. There's like a journal for the caretaker. There's like a journal for like Scarlet Witch. There's a journal for like another thing about the a person on the island, and a lot of it is like, okay, whatever. And there's like just so many collectibles that like I don't really care. And there's also like, oddly enough, there's also these chests around the island that you cannot even just open. You need arcane keys. So like it's really weird at first when like you get to like run around, you see like an arcane chest right nearby. And it's, oh, you can't open this. You don't have an arcane key. I'm like, what the fuck is an arcane key?
Please
And,
don't
like,
tell me that's like a purchase microtransaction.
So it's not. You earn
Okay.
these through like side missions. Like there's like some general missions that have like these optional objectives that you can toggle on, and like some of the rewards I saw was like, oh, you can get like arcane keys if you like do this optional objective with this character in it. And like this optional objective was like fling like 3 people into like magic's portals for that mission. I'm like, okay, sure. So that's not something you can purchase. Now that you did mention it, though, there is like a marketplace for this game where you can like purchase cosmetics for characters. Um, I don't know the exact exchange. Like you do see like they'd use a form of in-game currency, but you can use real life money to like buy this currency, and then that the money that you put in is like converted into that currency, and then you use that currency to buy these cosmetics. I like it'll display how much money, like what the conversion rates are for like real life money into like this currency to buy those cosmetics, but it doesn't show how much these cosmetics are at face value, because the code that I got, it just shows that I own all of them, so it just doesn't show a price, it just says owned. I'm like, okay, I guess. But from what I can tell, these are only cosmetics only, just skins. They don't provide any benefit. There are earnable outfits you can get for your hunter OC that do provide passive benefits, but from what I can tell at the moment, these are all earnable in the game. You can't buy any of them with real money. There's no way to buy any of them with real money. Like you need to actually like achieve like in-game objectives, whether it's like progressing the main story up to a certain point, or like getting like filling out some of like the side collectibles, and like once you earn like all these collectibles, you unlock this outfit that has this passive. So that's from what I understand at the moment. Like, there's no way to like kind of buy power for you. You have to earn that with the like unlockable outfits for your hunter character.
I know being able to say that it's cosmetic only, not pay to win, is like, that's a good bar to clear. That's a very important bar to clear.
Yeah.
But it also just seems kind of unfortunate that we live in an era that if this game had released on the PS2, and this is me being a boomer, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like,
I know.
where if Blade had 4 alternate outfits, you would just earn those, and then you would just use them. And now it just kind of stinks where it's like, do you want Blade to have outfit alternate color B? Well, give us $4.99 or whatever. It's just kind of like, man, like, yeah, I know it's cosmetic, but it's still a sour taste.
Like the Spider-Man symbiote suit, very iconic suit for Spider-Man. That's something you have to buy. That's not something you earn in the game, from what I can tell. It's also weird too, because you also have another form of currency in the game. Like, this game has credits, which is like a currency used for like mainly for crafting. You have gloss, which is like a currency you use mainly for like unlocking cosmetics, which is basically like in this game, there are the ways you engage with the Abbey. You can like decorate like the Abbey with like certain like pictures or comic covers that you earn, but in order to like place them in the Abbey, you need to like use this gloss currency to do it. If you want to like put like accessories on your character, like say mine has like a red hairband, and also like aviator sunglasses, you need to use this gloss currency. Gloss is not the currency that you pay with real money. That's a whole other separate thing. But like gloss is something you earn as you play, like missions and so forth. But it's just like it just feels weird that like there's like a lot of this stuff is like locked behind like this gloss currency. Like even like taking off pictures from the Abbey to replace it with another one that requires a certain amount of gloss to do. You know, it's weird. It's very weird. Like even like unlocking like alternate colors for like outfits that requires gloss, and that gloss currency only goes up with the rarity of outfits. So like if you're trying to change the colors of like a legendary outfit, could take more gloss than if you're trying to change the outfit of a rare outfit. And it's like it's so fucking weird. I'm like, okay, I guess it's so like this will feel a little bit, but it feels so AAA video gamey.
It does. Like,
makes sense.
Like let's make sure we get players. They pull out their spreadsheets or whatever, so they can account for all this stuff and make sure that they figure out the most efficient way to farm their gloss. Like, oh, if you do this mission over and over, I don't know like how the game is set up exactly, but that seems like that's just what it's going to be. Like, why does this have to be a currency in the first place? Because people will just find the most efficient way to get it and then just do that like out of necessity and just be like, okay, this is how you get gloss really effectively if you want to decorate your room. I don't know. That's another thing where it's like this game's core gameplay. And we'll probably wrap this up, try to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes just because we have a couple other games to get to. Right. But this game's core gameplay loop seems inherently well designed and well made. And even though I know it's like the superhero, people take it or leave it in terms of how they feel about that. It seems like it is a way that they can have interesting characters with different capabilities that they can almost assign different classes to in a way with their different arsenals. But then just everything around it is just it's like a game with a good idea with a bunch of caveats. Is kind of my having not played it, of course, is the way that like my brain is compartmentalizing it after seeing both Scott play it at the preview event and hearing you discuss it now.
Yeah. I guess the last things I want to say for it is like there are ways to like kind of enhance like your cards of your characters. Like there'll be like certain like items that you get after missions that like you can think of them as like card packs. So like you go over to like Tony Stark and he'll like open the card pack for you, and then like you have initially a set of 3 that you can choose from, and you can choose one out of them. And then like if you research something to like further, like now I can like each card pack will unveil 4 cards and I can pick 2 of them, and then any duplicates of cards I get, you can like use another currency to like fuse them with your existing card and like make them better. So any dupes that you get, you can fuse them with your card to enhance their capabilities. And then there'll be like times where like do you want to research something in the game, and then this threw me off at first. I know this will throw everyone off at first when they see it. It'll say this research for this like facility will take 1 day, and like it'll say 1 day left. And because modern video games have like poisoned our minds so much, people like I'm sure a lot of people will think it's like, does that mean like one whole like real life day that I have to wait?
Like an actual stamina timer or something.
Yeah, it's like no, that's actually one in-game day, because like how the XCOM-esque gameplay loop finally works in this game once I reach that part is like it goes by days. So like once you like start a day in the game, like you'll have like your research done. You can like open card packs. You can like hang out with people, do your daily training to like earn like friendship experience points and so forth. So do whatever like your quote unquote dailies are in the game, so to speak. And then you go do a mission, whether it's a story mission or a side mission. Then once you get back from that mission, it's nighttime, and during nighttime, like there might be like club activities. For some of your superheroes, you might be able to hang out with other people there. And then like when you wrap up that day, you go to sleep, and then the next day begins. And then and that's a kind of like the XCOM game loop of like you kind of have like you can go about it at your own pace. And unlike XCOM, where there's like kind of like a timer on you for XCOM, this one doesn't seem to have a timer on you, so you can kind of like just go about it at your own pace and not be feel compelled to always push the story after every so many days, because like it seems like the general missions like are always going to be available. It seems like those never run out. So like if you need a certain resource or you want to get more card packs, like
More gloss.
or more gloss, then you can just like repeat, like do those general missions over and over again until you're ready to do the next story mission. So that's kind of like generally like what the gameplay loop of it is so far. Like so far, like I am enjoying it once like I'm able to like once I was able to finally like play the game like and like really engage with like the battle system like at a normal pace, unlike the beginning of the game where it was like you have to go through like literally through hours of like fucking tutorials of like here's why the abbey matters and like here's how you can do the abbey and explore the abbey and do all this shit, and you're just like okay whatever, like I'm sure that'll speak to like some people for sure, like if they're really into like the lore of their games and like really want to like really flesh out the narrative of like this original Marvel character and like all the relevant characters to that. But for me, like the main appeal of this game is like really digging into the battle system and like facing challenging scenarios.
I'm with you totally on that.
Yeah, so that's my general impression of the game after 9.5 hours so far.
Mm-hmm. And with that, we'll move on to some of the other games that were released this last week. And these ones are a little bit niche with a little bit more limited target audience. So I will open up this section of the starting of our podcast, I say at the 80-minute mark, with an Obsidian game that released in the last week, and that is Pentiment. So Pentiment, this is a game that has been headed up by Josh Sawyer, who of Fallout New Vegas fame. This is the first Obsidian game that I think is truly released under the Xbox Game Studios banner. And no, I take that back. Grounded was. So this is the first one, the second one then. So Pentiment was announced and unveiled earlier this summer as basically a narrative adventure RPG that takes place in 16th century Bavaria or Germany during the time of the Holy Roman Empire. With an art style kind of inspired specifically by the art style at the time. So basically what this game is that anyone who follows Josh Sawyer on Twitter knows that he's like educated in kind of this realm, and he really loves books like In the Name of the Rose and things like that, and a bunch of others. Like he is much more, of course, well-versed than me. This is clearly a passion project for him, and luckily Microsoft was able to say like, sure, we'll handily support that. And people have been talking about how he's had podcast interviews and things like that, where he talks about how Game Pass has allowed him to create this more experimental game with a limited audience. So I went ahead and picked this up as I thought this was something that was kind of foreign to me. I had no history or knowledge of this time period, of this setting. Even I thought the initial showing of Pentiment was not something that I would be up my alley. And I ended up being very highly surprised by this game. And it's a hard game to describe and also a hard game to sell. So I'm not going to quite try to do that. But it's a sort of game where after I've played it and the more I thought about it, the more I appreciated it and the more I liked it. So I did write up a review up on the site if you want to get some more like written, pen to paper thoughts on the game. But very rarely, typically when I'm writing reviews or even just like compartmentalizing my thoughts for a podcast impressions, I end up finding myself focusing on the negatives, or like I'll have an initial like score in mind, but I find myself shifting downwards the more that I think or criticize or analyze a game. But this game, it felt like more of the opposite, where the more I thought about it, the deeper that I kind of thought about its impression on me, the more I kind of ended up liking it. It's a game where you play as a journeyman artist who is in a tiny little farming village in the Holy Roman Empire, in I believe southern Germany, or southern of what is modern day Germany, and you end up at the heart of basically a whodunit. It's a murder mystery, and you are in a kind of a unique position where you are currently like boarding with one of the peasants, but you're of a pretty like, not a noble stock, but you're like an upstanding citizen with, a trades citizen. And so you've got like, you're able to interact with the peasants, with the citizens, and then even with the brothers and the nuns of the nearby abbey. So basically it's like you're in charge of figuring out who did this and we want to bring the right person to justice so that we can keep the respect in of our little township and not incur the wrath of the neighboring larger barons and dukes. So the whole game is basically entirely dialogue. There are no stats. There are some like traits or talents where you can say like, my character has studied in Italy, therefore I know a little bit of Latin, or things like that. Or like my character has an interest in the arcane, so I know a little bit about like necromancy or things like that. Or it can be like history or business or politics or things like that, which kind of affects what dialogue choices you have. And basically the game gives you leads in terms of these are the characters that you meet. And the game kind of fire hoses you at the start, where within like the first hour of gameplay, that I think is where if you have any passing interest in this game at all, you need to kind of get past that first hour point to see if this game is something for you, because it's kind of a bit of a fire hose of here's a bunch of characters. You're not going to remember them all when you first are introduced to them. It's going to be kind of a blur. And then characters will refer to other characters in passing. And you're like, hey, who was that again? Who was the baker? Who was the miller? Who's the stonemason? Who's the blacksmith? Things like that. But once you kind of get past that point, this game, and I'm not the first person to make this comparison, so it's not a novel one, but it really kind of reminds me, at least in scope, of Disco Elysium. And what I mean by that is that it is kind of like, I believe it's Tim Schafer has a famous saying, or somewhat famous saying, where he says that if he could make anything, he'd make his city block RPG, an RPG that's basically scoped down to basically be as immersive as possible in a very limited space with a very small number of characters. That's
That
kind
was
of what this
Warren Spector.
Warren Spector.
No.
I'm sorry, I got the wrong name.
No worries.
Warren Spector. Thank you, Adam. And that's kind of what this game, that thought, and then my experience with Disco Elysium. That's what this reminds me of, because it all takes place in like this little peasant village that has about 3-4 screens, and then the Abbey, which has like 3 or 4 more. There's probably a total of like 40 characters. And usually they're like grouped into families. Like here's the miller's husband and wife and their kid. And as you play, you just start to actually like, oh yeah, it's the miller's son. I remember meeting them over at the Roman ruins or whatever. Or
Ursula,
it's like, oh yeah,
she doesn't know how to speak.
Yeah, it's Ursula. She's still learning how to speak and things like that. And you start like having characters that you're genuinely rooting for, and then characters who are you're actually like kind of feel animosity for because they're jerk faces or whatever. And then there's also the passage of time is a clear mechanic in this game, both in the short term and in the long. In the short term, it's basically like, we want you to name a culprit by the end of the week. So you have all these leads and you kind of have to pick and choose which ones you're going to follow. So for people who like to exhaust everything and do absolutely everything, that is something that like that inclination is something you kind of have to be able to put to the side, because the game is framed and set up that you are not able to investigate everything. You cannot exhaust all options before you make a choice. You kind of have to go with your gut. In addition to that, the saving of this game is almost entirely auto saves. So if you make a choice and it pisses someone off, yeah, you might be able to like Alt F4 and quickly like get back in before the autosave finishes. But like by design and intent, you don't have like a save file where like, oh, let me reload and make the other save. You kind of have to roll with it. And I actually kind of appreciate. Yeah, there's no save scumming. I mean, I'm sure you could like manipulate save files on PC, but the intent is no save scumming. You get the choices you get. Whether you're a jerk or a hedonist or a well-literate, educated person, and whether you fraternize, I can't speak. Whether you hang out with the peasants and you kind of besmirch the higher class or the other way around, you kind of have to roll with it. Which I actually think, yes, it's kind of an inconvenience to the player, but in a deliberate way that I actually ended up kind of appreciating. It's one of those things where it's like, take away the option for me to save scum, and all of a sudden I'm not really caring as much as, oh no, I pissed this guy off, or oh no, this person, like it said, I wasn't quite able to convince them to give me the information I wanted. It felt a lot more, I was able to get a lot more enjoyment out of it, and which I kind of felt like is something that you had to have going with Disco Elysium as well, where you just kind of like, the game will not end. Your story becomes your own. And the outcome yet you get is something that is kind of tailored to the person that you role played as, truly in a role playing sense. So in the passage of time aspect, that's this passage of time in the short term where you only have so many hours in order to like collect evidence, meet people, and gather information. In the long term, this game takes place across 3 major acts where several years will pass between parts. And that's kind of neat as well, because then you meet Ursula later and she's a young woman, or the old stonemason, he's still kicking around, he's still here. Oh, I convinced the blacksmith to go to the nearby town to meet this girl that he said he like had a fondness for, and it turns out they're married. And when I played through a second time, I didn't push him to do that, and the outcome was slightly different. In the second time period, he wasn't married, and things like that. I encouraged the miller's son to start to keep drawing on the Roman ruins, and now he's a lot more confident about it. So that's kind of how this game is slightly different from like a Disco Elysium or a truly open RPG. Is that the narrative that this game conveys is pretty much curated, it's fixed, it's set, but you can kind of affect little perturbations in how it's unveiled, like how different character stories ends up, whether the old widow gets to keep her home or not. There's even like an aspect where if you let a kid named Anna steal your hat early in the game, later in the game, her daughter will end up with a patched version of your hat later if you let her do that. It's little stuff like that is just kind of like a little attention to detail, just like really well thought out. Yes, the game is always going to kind of end at the same place. This isn't a sort of game where it's like you make choices and your outcome is wildly disparate from the next person over that plays it, but you notice little things like that instead. And then also in terms of attention to detail, this game is, a lot of it is about writing and about art, and like every single character, when they are like writing their dialogue, like peasants, their dialogue will show up in a different manner than the monks at the monastery, will be slightly different than there's the family of printers where their dialogue doesn't get written in at all. It like has an old printing press sound effect and it all shows up at once. So there's little ways that different characters, like their upbringing, their educatedness and things like that is manifested in that the way that their dialogue is presented. And I didn't quite catch this, but I guess like some characters that are a little bit less educated, when their script is first showing up, it'll have like typos in it and then it'll correct itself really quickly.
Oh,
So it's little like things like that where it's just like, man, they really they knew exactly kind of what they were going for here, in terms of knowing what they want their characters to be. And this game is just really good characters, whether they're simple farmers or people that you interact with a lot.
I think that's important for this type of game because it doesn't have any voice acting, right?
Nope. So yeah, it's got tons of language support. It sounds like the best 2 languages to play it in are English and German, kind of obviously English Studio and set in Germany. So that's an option for those that have that capability. And the main thing about this game, especially as I got to the ending, is that the narrative is, you don't quite know it at the time, but everything builds towards the climax at the end, but in an understated way, where the game is this is going to sound a little bit mealy-mouthed, but it's like thematically consistent, where there's little anecdotes and you learn a lot of little history pieces of the characters' lives. And then obviously there's the murder mystery on top of all of it. And you kind of learn exactly why all these things and how all these things are connected together. Not in like oh wow, now everything makes sense, but just everything seems to have a purpose and a meaning. Unfortunately, I have to kind of keep it vague like that because to say anything more actually kind of spoils it, which I know I've been on the receiving end of people saying that about like visual novels that Josh and Chow have played or things like that, or even James, where it's like, I can't say more because it'll spoil it. But so obviously when this game is a murder mystery, this is not a spoiler. At the very end, you learn like who the ultimate culprit is. And it's one of those things where it just makes sense. Not in terms of like the evidence only, like, aha, they were the only person that fits the evidence, but in terms of like their motivation, how it connects to the rest of the story, what the story was trying to say. And what were you going to say, Chow?
I was going to say, what's the equivalent of a gas station attendant back in those days?
Oh, it's kind of got a little bit like that, to be honest. I know exactly he's referring to Persona 4, but I guess we should probably put it.
Well, wait, when you're talking about the ending, like when you figure out who did it, it reminded me of Disco Elysium. Like you learn who did it, but there's a reason why. Like it's more than just, aha, it was that person, you know? So
exactly.
Does this game have multiple endings?
It has one main ending, so it's not multiple endings, but like the
But
way
the way you get
it's
there,
it's kind of like the route you take to get there
okay,
will change.
interesting. Okay,
Yeah, and it's one of the games where like at the end, it was like, I'll be honest, it's one of those things where if you were like really paying attention, it's like you could probably call who did it. Like I'll just put it like any good mystery should be. Like the evidence makes sense. It's not like out of nowhere like the earlier mentioned game where it's like how could you
I think that's a good thing.
how could you have seen that coming?
This is a bit of a tangent, but there was another Obsidian game I played not too long ago, like last year, that had a murder mystery. It was one of the DLCs for the Outer Worlds. And I'm just going to spoil it. It was this unnamed identical twin that I never mentioned before and no one ever knew about. Like, come on.
This is the opposite of that.
Yes.
So this game takes about 15 to 20 hours to beat. And I think, to be honest, some of the people's, I've seen some of the feedback for the game, and like, I had to increase the text speed to maximum because otherwise it does like, obviously they have like a really deliberate way that the text is presented, but it's also kind of maybe a little bit overindulgent where it's like, okay, I get it. Let me set the text speed to max. I guess they're going to patch it or have already patched it. By the time you listen to this, maybe it might be already patched.
I saw mention that they changed some of the sound effects for the text.
Yeah, it was a little loud because like I don't think there were separate sound effect slider for the text scroll and then just general sound effects. So I think they separated those out. They were going to or already did add like an instant text appearance option. There is like an easy text or an easy read font mode, which is kind of nice because some of the fonts are a bit ornate, and you do lose a little bit of the like if you have the easy text font mode, then I think the peasants and the monks end up with the same font, which is like that's okay. You lose a little bit there, but it's the sort of game that by the time I got to the ending, I was just like, this is the only way it could have ended. This makes narrative sense. It builds on the themes of the game has been selling to me. This is just, it's well thought out. That's kind of the like it all wraps together really nicely. It's not just trying to shock you and be like, aha, it was actually this. Oh no, are you surprised? It's not trying to surprise you. Instead, it's just trying to captivate you a bit. So it's just really well written, and that's something that the studio's had a pedigree for. And so like I'm not surprised to see it's a strength here. And I'll even say like when I saw the initial trailer reveal, like man, that art style is going to be an acquired taste. But it is kind of like the same sort of thing where you put yourself in it for an hour and you kind of acclimate to it, and you actually really try to appreciate like it's not overwrought. It's very simple. It kind of matches like the tone of the game. And I didn't quite catch this, but I saw some people saying like the different generations are drawn slightly differently. This is the sort of game where like I bet there's like so many little details that you could easily, there's things that you catch. Like I caught the fact that the printers had different text font and things like that, where I caught like the little, like the daughter having the hat, things like that. But then I'm sure there's like a dozen things I didn't catch. Like I didn't catch potentially that different generations are drawn with a slightly different art style. So it's just like a really like you can clearly tell that this is a passion project of something that someone really feels strongly about. So like you talked about Midnight Suns, like well we gotta have a treasure chest and key mechanic. We gotta have a Metroidvania mechanic. We gotta have 18,000 currencies. This game is just it's like the antithesis of that.
Generally, how long is a playthrough of this?
I'd say 15 to 20 hours. Well, if the instant text, I think I've seen some people. It kind of depends on like, do you go around the whole city and talk to people to see if their dialogue is updated every time the times changes or not, things like that. And I bet you once the instant text option comes in, that will just naturally kind of cut down the time a bit as well.
So, is there any like incentive to like replay the game out of like I don't know? Is there like different results? Because like you said, there's only one main ending, right?
Yeah, it would be kind of if you want to like pursue different leads or learn like before I examined the murder body and I investigated this way, but instead this time I'm gonna have dinner with the townsfolk and like I'm gonna investigate with that route and things like that. So it would basically, if you liked the story and the characters enough and you kind of want to interact, like on my last playthrough I barely ever interacted with the bakers, so this time I'm going to do that and I'm going to ignore the abbey or things like that. So if you really enjoyed like the setting and the characters, it would just basically be able to see the scenes and the events and the dialogue that you didn't get to see your last playthrough.
Yeah, I want to get around to this game sometime in the future. I hopefully soon.
Mhm.
We'll see. But yeah, it seems like a really intriguing game that's up my alley. I've been intentionally trying to know as little as possible about this game. So it's definitely one of those games that I feel like I want it to be at a time where like I'm not really playing anything else because it feels like it would be hard to like follow up with it if you're like trying to juggle multiple things and you lay it down for too long.
Yeah. So
you were talking about like small details. Apparently, like they hired for the Italian characters, they hired someone to be a consultant for their gestures.
Oh,
wow.
Like the Italian characters actually have like consulted like here's how an Italian person would gesture when they're talking. Like
Jesus.
more than just stereotyped. Like an actual consultant.
That's above and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I did encounter a few things that I think will be addressed pretty quickly. But like as with any game with any intricate dialogue system, there were a few places where I would talk to a character and they would reference events that I didn't see because the logic wasn't quite set up right. You know what I mean? And then or they like I had already seen something, but then I spoke with another character where whatever on the back end wasn't flagged, like, oh, I already did that. They don't seem to recognize that I already did that. And the further I got into the game, like in Act 3, the final act, I saw that more often. And it's one of those things where it's like, that's a bummer. It's a little bit of bummer to see that blemish on a game that has otherwise such really good attention to detail. But I think, I kind of trust the developer to sort those out and kind of address those, make sure that the game does like all the proper logic flags are in place so that, that thing doesn't take you out of the moment. But other than that, like just, I really appreciated it. And I kind of stated it. I appreciate it and recommend it in the same way that you recommend someone visit a local museum or a local aquarium, not in terms of like the content, but in terms of like the experience and how you enjoy those sorts of things, where you find like a little bit more meaning out of it, or you find like, yeah, I really appreciated that. It's not something that's like, yeah, this game is exciting, go play Pentiment, it's great. It's like, no, it's just something that I really appreciated. It's really fun just to see the passion in this at display here. And it's stuck, and the story was well written and really captivating at times and just stuck with me. So it's something that I do wholeheartedly recommend, though you do kind of have to acclimate to its scope and its pace.
Sawyer even mentioned that the Pentiment was like the only reason Pentiment was like even made was because like Game Pass exists. Like it allowed
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, to
really... it's interesting to see a game like this where it's like maybe if it was only allowed to be released in the traditional sense, I'm not convinced that maybe it would have been greenlit just because of the type of game it is. Like you said, it's a passion project. It's very I wouldn't maybe not limited in scope, but it's definitely like laser focused in a sense. That's like if it wasn't for Game Pass, it would be one of those games where it's like they'd have to make the argument, oh, who is this for? Whereas with Game Pass, having a variety of games is maybe more important than having blockbusters all the time.
Yeah, I think that's really like an interesting way of like viewing it, like from a game development angle, like on like where you shift your focus, what sort of systems are in place and foundationally that allows you to be flexible like that. And I hope to see like more types of these projects in the future of like of studios that generally produce blockbusters to like take on like relatively smaller scope projects because systems like Game Pass are in place. Like imagine if like Santa Monica Studio on Sony's side was able to like create something smaller scoped, like more along the lines like Pentiment. Like what would that look like? That's an interesting.
Well, I saw some people compare it to the remember the era of UbiArt, where Ubisoft allowed little studios to make like Valiant Hearts and Child of Light and things like that. That's kind of what I saw someone compare it to, that like a big studio just allowing people to make passion projects. And so it's kind of like that. I do want to say one more thing. Oops, sorry, go ahead, James.
Sorry. I was going to say, I do know that EA's been doing that a lot with their like EA originals.
Yes, EA has been doing a really good job of that.
Some of them are bigger, like obviously Wild Hearts is coming out, and that's obviously a big budget game, but they also have like some smaller stuff there, like Faye and whatnot. So
all of Ferris's video games. Hazelight.
As someone that played the most recent one of his,
It Takes Two.
It Takes Two. I'm not sure if I'd call that a low budget game.
Yeah, I wouldn't call that low budget, but I think the one before trying like a way out. I think that's like more along the lines. Yeah, like that, because that was definitely a foundational project to It Takes Two. And even I think like what was it called, like
Brother, A Tale of Two Sons.
There we go. Yeah.
I do want to say one last thing. I know I've seen people voice this concern, and I kind of get it. The game takes place in a setting that is very Catholic, and obviously part of it takes place literally in an abbey. And I saw some people saying like, I don't know if I vibe with that, just because like it's kind of out there and a little bit maybe antiquated. Like, I'll just put it this way: I am not religious. I have no understanding or history of the 16th century Europe. And I still found like great enjoyment of this game. I don't see that as a requirement to enjoy this game. You kind of end up like being immersed in the setting, even if you're a little bit ignorant of it, which I am. So I saw some people concerned, like, I don't know if I will vibe with that. Like, I can't guarantee that you will, but I'll say that I have no like predilection for that, and I was able to vibe with it just fine. So
Ryan, you and those fours are also in luck. You can now buy the Bible on Steam as well.
I don't know what you're referring to.
That?
I shit you not. Go search the Bible on Steam. You can buy it.
Damn.
Anyways, so I have my written review up on the site. If you kind of want to see the more concrete impressions of that game, I thought it's really good, and I highly recommend it. And then I know we're approaching the 2-hour mark here, but we do have one last game to talk about before we go into the news. And that is the last release of this last week that we touched on very briefly in a preview sense last time, but now it is released, and we are going to hand it over back to James to talk about Monochrome Mobius.
Yeah. So I guess I didn't, preview sense. I know that Josh played the PS5 demo for the Japanese version of the game. To be clear, this game has come out day and date in the West, PC only. I did a whole article about it months ago where I said I understand why. It's still a little bit disappointing for folks that maybe wanted to play it on console. Very unfortunate. But so the good news, the PC port, while I wouldn't say it's amazing, it's definitely better than the studio's other PC versions that they've done in the past. First off, it is not locked to 720p, 30 FPS. It has a 60 FPS cap this time, and it can go up to. I'm playing it on both my Steam Deck and my desktop, but mostly Steam Deck. But I did play it on my desktop, and it is like 4K, up to 4K at least. So how in depth was the demo you played, Josh? Like, how far did it take you? Did you get to go to the main Yamato Road, or did you?
I got to like the first starting area, and then I got to the village, and then I was like, I got to like the scene where the main heroine was stealing an apple or something, with like those really comedic sound effects, and then I was like, I can't play anymore this demo because I feel sick because of the motion blur.
So good news, the motion blur. It appears like, at least on the PC version, that the motion blur is not active except during battles now.
Okay, that's really good. Yeah, a user follower on Twitter is playing the console version of the game and recorded some footage of it. And the footage that I saw that they recorded, it seems like that the motion blur, like when you're generally like just walking around, like seems to be either less severely lessened or like almost like entirely removed. So like it looked a lot easier on the eyes from their recorded footage, and I was like, "Oh, thank God!" Like that feels miraculous for like going from like demo to final game these days.
I mean, granted, when you think about it, it's like motion blur. It is something they can just like check in a box, like how much it blurs. And
yeah, but like that, like they like understand that like yes, this is really bad. Like there's like. It's like changes from the demo to final game. It's like almost non-existent for most games these days. But in this case, like thank God, it was like night and day.
Yeah, and I haven't actually seen. So take this with a grain of salt. I haven't actually seen the confirmation, but I have seen some people say that somewhere Aqua Plus said that they are going to patch the NPC models to be not like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't seen that, but yeah.
They look creepy.
Yeah. But I'll just say this. It's a JRPG in the Utuarumona series. It's a preview to the second and third game, kind of bridging the gap between the first game and the other two games in the trilogy. You take control of Ashtor, who is a major character in Mask of Deception and Mask of Truth. And you kind of get his backstory and the backstory for a couple of other characters that were major in, again, Mask of Deception, Mask of Truth. And I did not expect this game to have as big of a scope as it actually ends up having, because it's deceptive. Because the first area you pop into is this like little mountain, like incline. It's a decently sized area, and there's like twists and turns and things you can find and whatnot. But it's like kind of standard, more budget JRPG fare for like
very fairly linear at that very, very starting spot. Yeah.
Yeah. You get back to the village, you deal with the setup for the game, and then almost immediately you head out of the village to the main road, and then it's like, oh, this is wide open. There is a lot of space to explore, and it's like the mountain road. Well, the mountain road that you explore at the very beginning, that's like one of those like side paths or like that connect between the bigger like connecting roads. There's one main area that kind of connects all these like side areas that you can explore and connects towns and whatnot, called the Yamato Road. It's massive. It's absolutely massive. It's and there's like all sorts of different things you can explore. There's different enemies. There's the game itself looks surprisingly great for this studio's first 3D game. Like there's tons of foliage. There's the lighting is good. Like obviously it's not perfect. Things are uneven, but especially if you're playing on Steam Deck like I am, it kind of like blends together anyways because of the lower resolution. I will say this game runs fantastic on there. You won't be getting 60 FPS, but if you just keep it on medium settings, it's like a locked 30 FPS at 720p if you put on the 30 FPS cap and through the Steam Deck's OS settings.
This was a surprise too for like both of us, because like the 30, there was a 30 FPS cap on the PS4 PS5 version from the demo, and then you got back when you got access to the PC version saying, oh, like this actually runs at 60 FPS, like just like you can, that's what it's capped at, like when you're playing it on like more than the Steam Deck and so forth. So they actually upped the frame rate cap on there, which is like kind of a big surprise because the PC ports of the Urovare Rumono trilogy, like VNs, like they were all like 30 FPS cap. So that like we just like
720p too.
Yeah, 720p also. I was like, it's like our expectations of this PC port were just like in the gutter. Yeah. So to hear that like this is at like the PC version, like PC port of this game, which is like the official English one in the West, like is actually a decent fucking port from its like original console releases in Japan, is like, wow, that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, the game looks like genuinely good. I posted a screenshot from my desktop. You guys can check really quick. But yeah, it genuinely looks pretty good. It runs really well. The gameplay's interesting. It has this thing called the battle ring system. And it's basically like, it's not just that you have a timeline and like turn order, but there's like different tracks that your party and enemies will run on. Everyone starts on the outermost ring, which means that you have more to run across to get to your turn. But if you stagger an enemy or get overzeal, you can get a chance to move to a ring that's closer to the center, which has less room to move, which means that your turn, you'll cover the area to get back to the starting position of the ring quicker. And so there's a whole like kind of song and dance of, okay, you staggered an enemy, your next person up, you could attack and get onto the faster track, or you can wait for person's turn after that, because maybe they're your healer and you want them to be moving quicker. So if you're taking a lot of damage, you can have more heals coming out at a quicker pace. And then obviously there's some attacks that like just on average, if you deal damage, it'll knock enemies back, or you'll be knocked back if you get hit a little bit on the turn order. But there's certain attacks that will like deal more knockback on the turn order than others, and then obviously there's attacks with other sorts of aspects to them. And early on, there's not too much to it, but I've only put about 10 hours into it before Pokemon came in. But like even by the time I was like at like the 10-hour mark and I finally got my full party, it's like, yeah, this is there's some neat aspects to this combat. Most of it you're only going to really see in boss battles or like side quest bosses, but it's definitely shaping up to be interesting, and the story is shaping up to be interesting, and it's honestly really impressive for like Aquaplus's first real like 3D game, and like just looking at the visuals, looking at the presentation, it's like, man, they for such a small studio, this is honestly like the scope and scale, and I hope this does well, because I'd love to see them like build upon this, because they clearly have the talent there to maybe kind of fulfill that sort of niche that I mean, so many of this so like it feels like, especially recently, there's been a lot of like double A JRPGs. Like we had just Star Ocean like a month and a half ago. We have like Falcom doing their thing. We have Gus doing their own thing. But it's like I'm always like happy to see more games like this, and I definitely see the blueprint. And maybe it's even more than the blueprint, because I need to get more into it once I'm done with Pokemon. But this is promising. It's a lot of fun. The story's interesting. The localization has some issues, but that makes sense, because I think this is the first project that Shirabune's done that was day and date with the Japanese release. And I'm sure it'll be patched down the line, because it's PC. They don't have to pay for releasing patches, so they can just like whenever they receive like information about, oh, there's issues with localization, hopefully they can get that fixed up quickly. And it's mostly, from what I can tell, just like typos. But yeah, not too much to say, I guess. Again, still very early on. I will say though that even though this is a prequel, so technically you can like play this without having played the rest of the series. I'm not sure if I would recommend it, because there's definitely aspects of it where it kind of feels like it expects you to know what's going on, or it like hints to things that like happen in later games that makes you think, what the hell is the story going with here, if they're referring to this, where it's like, that doesn't make much sense. Interesting.
Yeah, I think that'll be the most challenging thing about this game, because like when you put that out, like it feels like this game is primed for people who are already like fans of the series. So for people who want to like get into it like without that background, like they want to understand what's going on in this game, they have 3 full games that they'll have to get through. Yeah.
There's one thing with prequels, like, okay, let's just say Shauna from the cover, for example, right? You don't see her in like the later Utamaru mono game.
Shunya, you mean? Yeah, you don't see her in later.
Well, you probably know that she's probably dead at the end, probably.
She's either gonna be dead, or she's gonna go somewhere far away and into the not crucial to the plot dimension, or whatever you want to say. But overall, I mean, like, and obviously, again, this is like a worldwide release on PC. I know that Josh just linked the SteamDB page and showing like the charts. For the type of game it is, I think it seems like it's doing all right, but you don't know what their expectations were.
Yeah, so I don't know that. Yeah, who knows how well they expect this to do. And I know they also, I don't know if this is still going on, but they had like a massive discount on the Udawari Ramono series, like when it was like near the release of this game. So they're really hoping that more people find their way into this series.
Yeah. But definitely one of those games where I am pretty sure most of the people listening to this podcast never even heard of it. If you're interested in the Utawari Ramono series, they're VN/tactical RPGs. They're pretty good. You can only really get the second and third game on PC, so if you're on console,
there's Vita, if that counts, if you want to buy it from eBay.
Vitamin's Life.
And you can buy the PS4 version physical on eBay, but if you want to get them for a reasonable price and play the best versions of the game, you got to get it on PC. And
to be clear, they're delisted. That's what we're getting at.
So. Yeah.
Okay, how about digital PS4? Does that count still, or no?
It's delisted.
It was Atlas. It was Atlas.
Yeah. Jesus. Oh my god.
Atlas did the 2 sequels, NAS America did the remake of the original, and
think-
all of those licenses I think were lost. So,
I think Prelude is still technically up on
Oh, it is?
PlayStation, but it
So-
doesn't really matter because if you want to play Mask of Deception, Mask of Truth, you're gonna have to play it on PC anyways. In which case, just get them all on PC. They're they are low spec enough. You can run them on anything. Like case in point, they're easy as hell to run on Steam Deck, and I keep saying best place to play them because PC ports aren't great. They're 720p 30 FPS locked, which sucks if you're playing them on a desktop, but if you're playing them on a Steam Deck where 720p is kind of what you're aiming for anyways, it's like, well, works out.
Yeah, I started the first game on Steam Deck. I'm still fairly early on, but I got busy with all sorts of things, so I do intend to get back to it.
I only beat the original version. I didn't really play the remake from, was it the one that's been published by Nisa? Was it now? Is it?
Yeah,
they did the console version anyway.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, James, for talking to Monochrome Mobius after we had the demo impressions last week or the week before. And yeah, you are right that these last two games, Pentiment and Monochrome, are probably for a niche audience. But that way, we kind of got the full gamut. We got biggest IP in the world from Pokemon. We got Marvel and Midnight Suns, and then we got these other two. So that's kind of the nice thing about this genre is that it kind of, like you said, the double AJRPGs are kind of all over the place now, and it's why we always constantly feel like we're drowning in terms of coverage for the site. But kind of good to know that we're getting more releases coming day and date in English and Japanese and on PC. So it's really kind of compared to the world that we lived in 10, 15 years ago. This is really quite neat that get the experience tailored to their kind of what they like and to the scope that they like and on whatever platform they like.
Meanwhile, China are still working through not even an A or double A. We're like, I don't even know it's a B game. We're like, we're still working through Astilibra revision, and I don't even know where you even where you even classify that. Like, what letter do you give that in that spectrum? It's not even a B game. It's
like a one-man army game. Okay, it's made by one dude.
But I still need to start that. I need to finish Pokemon. I need to get the Harvestella properly after all this. It's like nightmare.
You know what's even wild? I learned that the free version of the game lets you play the entire main story, except for the post game. The post game is new Steam content.
Well, I'm at the quote unquote post game right now in that game. Just a very, very quick update, and it's still story relevant what's going on there. Like, I was fucking shocked last night when I got there. I'm like, oh, I'm not done with this game. I am definitely not done with this game.
There is one thing I can say for sure. There is never a dull moment in this game. You can never predict the plot.
No.
One thing I will say about Astilibra, and I know we've talked about this a bit in the past. If folks are interested in it, I do know that I've heard from a few friends that are translation and editing that there is a retranslation of that game that's in works for English. So,
it definitely needs some touch-ups on the English script for sure. Like, it's one of those. It's understandable that the English script is it's not perfect. It's pretty rough at some spots, but because of the staff on that game, it's understandable. But yeah, hopefully the retranslation. That's good that it's getting it. It definitely needs it, and hopefully it comes out in a timely manner. I really I'm surprised at how this game continues to reach new heights with its player base. It continues to break its 24-hour peaks and concurrent users. It's almost breaking 7,000 now in terms of that. It's for a game that no one really talks about and or is known in the wider sphere. So I'm just that's crazy.
I think it tells you that the power of word of mouth is it's the most effective form of advertisement. It's like Demon Souls when it released on PS3. I think word of mouth is just more effective than a company keep trying to shield their products nonstop, right?
Thank you, Atlas. Is crazy. So I'm looking at the Steam page now for the game, and I remember back when we first heard about this and we were talking about it on the podcast, it was around I want to say 200 reviews. Now it's at 2,506. Yeah, this game has kind of maybe blown up isn't the right term because it's still not huge, but it's that's close to 100,000 sales, and for a single person project, that's a massive success for them.
What other podcast is out there that will talk about Astilibra 3 different times in the October-November timeframe.
Chow, we need to fucking find time to like fucking talk about this game, and we're like done.
I
like,
will
anyone who
fight
else.
for this game in the game of the year.
Dude,
Okay?
I need to make sure I finish this before
Yeah.
because it sounds like this might actually be a top 5 contender from what
Like this game is fucking crazy. Like in terms of like what happens in it.
Okay,
so far.
let me ask a question. Is it actually good? You always say
Yes.
it's crazy, but is it good?
It's fun. It's fun as fuck. It is a very fun game.
I also like the plot because you can never predict it. It always go like a 180 out of the blue. It's like
that's
you would
what
think
I
that
was
you
asking.
know.
Is it actually good, or is it
No,
only
it makes
good by
sense. No,
value
no,
of just
no,
having twists all over the place?
no,
It makes
sense.
sense.
It makes
sets
sense.
up. It kind of sets up before, but you kind of not expect it in the most odd way, right?
Yeah, like
And there's
it's
this
like-
one part that Josh totally fucked up that I told him about it later, and he's like, "Oh, well, I guess I gotta live with my choices then." But
Yeah.
the game actually warns you about it, but you didn't really like take the suggestion, right?
No, I understand where Adam's coming from because whenever we talk about this game, we talk about like how insane it is, but we never actually talk about like it like being like good or enjoyable, right? Because we're always like blown away, but like by like it like things that we encounter, and it's like wow, that's fucking crazy, and that's the only way that really describe it at the moment. But like in terms of like, is it actually a good video game? It's like yes, it's an awesome video game. It's like it actually has like dungeons and like puzzles that like modern games don't fucking do these days, and like interesting puzzles that it's like okay, wow, that's an interesting solution to like get to this puzzle and like progress.
You
through this
literally
dungeon.
have to do it manually to solve these puzzles. Like one of the puzzle I got stuck on yesterday was trying to reach for this object in a jar, and you're like,
Oh yeah.
You have to like manually fill that jar with water to get the item out, but filling with like 1 cup of water is not enough. So you have to like do it multiple times.
and they teach you this like this concept and this mechanic earlier on in that chapter, like through a story event earlier on in that chapter. So like it clues you in, like also. So like this game is like really good at like signposting that. But we don't have to go into it all over again. That can be like for Game of the Year stuff. But like just know that yes, this game is like really really great gameplay wise as well. Like me and 2 other friends are like playing through this game like around the same spot, and we all have totally different builds and totally different strategies of how we progress through the game.
Yeah, I'm just brute forcing with this thing called the Berserk mode. It's like a Devil May Cry, Dante Must Die sort of mode. You do like so much damage to enemies, but you also get one-shotted by mobs.
Jesus.
But what was the thing I was gonna say? I'm not sure if you see the story the same way, Josh. But did you see that part with Gal being used as comic relief to solve a puzzle? Where he like basically threw Karen into the water for the golden.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I feel like they were using like a comic relief. It's like, do not do what this guy do. Do the opposite of what this guy do to solve this puzzle or something.
Yeah. Well, you can talk about it more, later on the year. But yeah, I would, we'll see how it does. I guess it's something. It's something.
Yeah.
I like how we got just an impromptu little Astilibra part at the very end there on the 2 hour mark of our
It's a small
podcast.
2-minute talk about it.
It's hard not to talk more about it, to be honest.
So we're going to the news section. We might need to pick our battles here a little bit so we don't take this on too long. Luckily, the news section, as it's kind of been for the last couple months, or at least the last month, basically a lot of release dates peppering into early next year. But there are a couple things. First, some article shout-outs for the site. I already mentioned that I wrote up the review of Pentiment up on the site at rpgsite.net. If you listened to last week's podcast, you heard Josh talk at length about his time with Tactics Ogre Reborn, another game that literally just came out that you could sink a ton of time into if you're inclined. Josh did write up his thoughts very thoroughly up on the site as well. So whether you listen to last week's podcast or not, you can listen to that for discussion on that game. But also go read the Tactics Ogre Reborn review up on rpgsite.net. And then I want to make sure I give a shout out to this one. James put up a pretty fun little feature up on the site about Monster Hunter and about Devil Joe's Tale. So I don't know if James, if you want to like have like a little comment or two about this article.
It's very funny because it's like ever since I played Monster Hunter, like I started off with the PSP, and I remember back when Try came out, like one of the memes about it was that, oh, Devil Joe, he'll eat anything, even his own tail. And people like legitimately believe that if you did not carve his tail immediately after you chopped it off, he could eat it and you'd lose that carve. And people just kept believing that for a decade plus. And even looking at the comments, people still believe it, even though like over the last like month, people like realize, wait a second, do we even haven't like what happened is somebody was like, okay, I'm gonna make a video about this because it's like it's a cute little thing. It's like a Monster Hunter fun fact, and they were looking for footage because they didn't want to like hunt a Devil Joe for it themselves, and they were looking around YouTube and they were like, I'm not finding any actual footage of him eating his tail. So they started asking the community, and then everyone started hunting him in every game. And it's like, he doesn't eat his tail. And now there's still people saying, oh no, but I remember seeing this. And it's like, no, people keep hunting him and keep trying. And every video, quote unquote, that supposedly shows it either has like raw meat or some sort of meat hidden in the tail, or it's like an emulator modded to make it look like it's eating its tail. It's just wild, just absolute Mandela effect. And like it, so many people have been playing, so many people have been playing Monster Hunter for so long, either cannot accept it, refuse to accept it, or just having a crisis of faith. And it's been very, very funny.
But yeah, so it's kind of a fun feature that we should we don't get those up on the site very often. So James went ahead and, as our big Monster Hunter fan and expert, went ahead and wrote that up and kind of put that feature up on the site as well. So that's just a fun little read.
Up. It was like,
yeah,
I remember like going to sleep and then waking up and looking at the tweet on the ERPG site account. It was just like, holy shit! When did it get like? I think it's past 1,000 retweets now or something.
Yeah, I guess I appreciate it while it's there, I suppose.
Yeah.
So into the news section. Starting out here, we've got some basically some trailers for some upcoming games. Some of these are right around the corner and some of these are a couple months away. We got a new trailer for the upcoming Fire Emblem Engage. So we haven't been following this quite as closely as we could have. I believe the official Japanese Fire Emblem account, ever since that this game was announced in the latest Nintendo Direct, has been sharing like little snippets of gameplay and things like that. This is our first major marketing of the game since its announcement. It is effectively a 3.5 minute long story trailer for the game. I'll be honest, story is probably one of the last things I play Fire Emblem games for. There is, as far as I can tell, like no gameplay in this trailer. The whole trailer is about the collection of the 12 rings or signets, or I'm not sure what they're called in the game, I forget, to summon the 12 heroes. They basically the whole crossover aspect of this game as like a series anniversary title. To me, it's kind of whatever, but it's one of those things where like I am excited for this game, but I'm not excited for this game for this reason. The fact that it's a crossover.
This also is one of those things where it's this is like just my philosophy and how I approach games. And we've talked about this before. Like, sure, I am interested in the story, but I'll just experience it when I play it. I don't need to like overanalyze a trailer. Like, oh, this must be this, and oh, this must be that, and this refers to this. And it's like, no, I'll just play it at some point and see the story. You know,
I mean, the real value of this is just seeing like like the models of like these characters. You see a lot of the characters that like was in the like initial key art for the game, but you never really saw the in-game models. So like this story trailer, like gives some of them like that aspect, which is fun.
Good to see Red Marv. How's that?
You see hinting at like other story revelations and all that sort of stuff.
And the production values are like good. It looks really good.
Yeah, like the actual like there's the visual fidelity and like the story scenes like seem to be a step up from what we saw.
I mean, technically, I know that the art style is kind of take it or leave it. It still kind of looks like a bunch of VTubers, but technically, it looks really proficient.
There's a rumor, according to leaks or something, that the protagonist gets to pick like a alignment, like a neutral, chaos or something, something, and his hair color will change.
Chow.
But
I think you fell for a joke. I think you fell for a joke.
That.
Because people posted a chart to say, here's how it might look. It was just the Shao the Hedgehog alignment chart.
Oh, really? Oh, God.
That's so sick. I thought you were going to say, Chow, like you heard a rumor that like the protagonist was like going to become a VTuber in the game. And
but I was hoping for that to fix up the Two-Face mistake.
No,
I wanted it to be true.
Oh my God, that's so sick. I mean, obviously their hair color, like the split hair color, is probably going to be story relevant. That's probably going to be like a plot mark of the game. Like that, even the trailer kind of hints at it. But like I said, like the real value of this, like just seeing some of these characters in motion, giving them, a little bit of their personality and like what you could expect. Like you see like your protagonist's mom in this trailer. Like that's sick.
And well, it's a wait. Doesn't the mom usually always die in every Fire Emblem game?
Yeah, well, in this trailer, she seems to be dying. So.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't say anything.
Well, there you go, guys. Dead moms is a Fire
I mean,
Emblem.
that's just a fucking JRPG staple. Like your parents probably kick it. Remember?
Oh, it could be
Guardians
dead
of the
dad first.
It happens to Three Houses. Spoilers. Geralt dies. You know,
Yeah.
Of course he's going to.
It's either
Yeah.
dead dad or dead mom.
He's basically your dad. So.
I mean, I'm excited for this game. Like, it still feels far off, even though it's coming out in
It's
January.
2 months. It's 2 months away, basically, which is crazy.
So, but I'm really looking forward to this. Like, it looks to have like a really fun like cast and a really interesting like gameplay gimmick to it. And I think the thing that I'm like hopeful about is like I'm hoping that the levels are more interesting than like Three Houses, like the level design.
Mm-hmm. We also got a trailer and a whole bunch of details for the upcoming Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. This is another one of those December releases, releasing on the 13th. We got a trailer that was titled the More Than a Remastered trailer, which it's not very long. It's about a minute long, basically just showcasing 2 different things. 1, the visual update, and 2, the gameplay update. So we got some new footage here. Talks about the summons, talks about the combat. And then alongside this, we got a bunch of screenshots. We got like a press release that went through a lot of details of how the game works. We got some of the specifications on how this game runs, like on every console. It's actually quite nice. I wish more publishers did this, where it's like, this is what resolution and frame rate it'll run on Xbox One S, Xbox One X, PlayStation 4, PS4 Pro, and so on and so forth. So basically, we know exactly how this game will run, at least purportedly.
The Steam options.
Yeah,
as well.
creating this game going to Nintendo Switch. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's also nice that they show the PC options and what sort of like tweaks you can make to the game. I also like the in-depth FAQ they used as well, because they actually answer the question like, will this game have the Nouveau? And they're like, no, it won't have the Nouveau, but the game data is still encrypted. Like that's an interesting like question to like pick out and like choose the answer from a official FAQ for a game. But yeah, it's a lot of info, and sure, like this is game is looking like better and better than Crisis Core was already like a pretty fun game on the PSP, but like just seeing all the improvements they're making to this.
As
but not only that,
actually got a chance to play the new version. Like before I wrote up my impressions for it, I outright like tried playing the PSP version, got to the first battle, and immediately was like, no, I've seen enough.
the nub. The single PSP nub, and then like this game was locked behind not only on the PSP but specifically on UMD only. This never got a digital release, right? So it's like you had the UMD and a PSP, and that's how you played it, and that's the only way you could play it until now. Now it's on everything.
You could also go through emulation as well.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
I'll be honest. That's how I tried out the first game before I wrote my impressions.
Yeah, and it's totally fine, because that's very hard to find. Yeah,
they don't sell the original.
Yeah, it's totally fine. Yeah, so I mean, like the details that really like I wanted out of this is like, oh, okay, it's gonna support up to 120 FPS on PC, and then it looks to be, and it's your usual like FAQ of like whatever the challenges of like making this game. It's like the fucking resolution of the PSP was fucked, so we had to go rebuild the game from square one. It's like you're right.
I don't know. PSP is odd hardware to me. I believe.
Go for it.
I was gonna say, I believe that system. The only way that's playable if you get it pirated. That way, that you load games from your SD card or your memory stick or whatever you want to call it, so that you skip all the loading times and solve all the issues, right?
When I played Birth by Sleep back in the day, I had 2 PSPs. I had like a PSP 2000 and a PSP Go, and I played it on my PSP Go because I made a backup of my UMD, and I was like, I'm going to play it on the system it was never meant to be played on digitally.
One of the interesting FAQ questions out of this is which engine and middleware tools have you've been using during development and why? They're saying they use Unreal Engine 4. The reason we chose that is because it supports multiple platforms and is designed for high-end game development. And then they're like, in addition, the original PSP version was developed in C++, so when we considered porting it over the source code, the fact that Unreal Engine can use C++ was another factor affecting the decision. So it's kind of like interesting, like small tidbits of like really, really technical high-end like decisions that
Interesting
they
that
make.
interesting that they pointed that out. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have expected them to.
Yeah, and that's kind of like obviously some of the mentality behind like Japanese game developers revisiting like older games and why might they be using like Unreal Engine 4 to support that effort, and and you kind of see some of the reasons why they do that. So that's it's like some of these questions are like really good.
Well, speaking of engines, do they still use the Luminous engine, or do they scrap that whole thing now?
Forspoken.
Yeah, only the one studio, Luminous Productions. So
Yep. So yeah, they're using the FF14 engine for that, or 15. Yeah.
And then one of the last pieces of major news here that we have, we kind of teased this at the end of one of our podcasts that Capcom was going to have a Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak digital event that was going to detail the next major title update. And we were kind of expecting this, but we got a title update 3 is launching in just a couple days at the time of recording on November 24th. This is adding two. Yeah, this is adding 2 Risen Elder Dragons. That is Risen Teostra and Risen Kashula Daora. And then a chaotic Gore Magala, which
Gore's awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so Gore Magala, I first played in the I think he was base Sunbreak, and then has the 2 forms. And I guess chaotic Gore Magala is like a mutation variant where it gets like stuck between the forms, hence chaotic. So that's the way
you're actually putting it out of its misery, because make no mistake, it is in very much pain. It does not want to live. That's why it's lashing out so much and it's so crazy. It's because it's always in constant agony, and you're basically doing it and everyone around it a favor.
It also makes the fight much more fucking deadly too.
And then the one thing that's interesting about this that I don't think that. So basically, I've said this before. For Monster Hunter World, I stayed up on all the title updates like the day they came out. On Rise, I haven't been. But they're talking about how like the way that these Elder Dragons are tiering up is that you have to be like Master Rank 120 to fight Risen Kashula Daora and Master Rank 140 for Teostra. I forget if there's a cap or requirement for Chaotic Gore Magala, but basically they're just like adding on to the end game. So basically for people who really like this game, they're just adding to the challenge, basically giving them constant goals to strive for. It's Capcom, we've seen it both in their main Monster Hunter games and even in stories. They are like really, really good at continuing support for their titles. That's one of my more broad takeaways here. And one thing
Also,
this is something
different.
I was going to talk about the followers update here. So when I played Sunbreak, I kind of dabbled in the follower quest, but I didn't do a lot of them, mainly because I was on a time crunch and just want to beat the game. But it seems like now you can before you had to you can only bring your followers, the game NPCs, on specific quests. Now it seems like they say that hunters who have grown attached to the villagers and knights of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak can now bring their followers with them on almost every master rank quest, including anomaly quests and even investigations. Obviously, you still have to play the follower quest to kind of like unlock them. I believe that. Yeah, so that's kind of it. Basically gives, if I'm reading this right and putting the pieces together in my head, it's like almost like built-in NPCs that have stories and histories behind them and weapon types or whatever, so you can like build a party to take on the challenges. And now they're kind of expanding the follower system so that you can go to any mastering quest with them, which I think is really kind of neat.
Not gonna lie, so some of the followers are kind of better players than some pubs. So something to think about.
Yep.
And then I was surprised about this, but so this is title update 3. They're already saying that there's a title update 4 planned for winter and a title update 5 planned for spring. So this will keep going. So I'm just
that lines up with what people have data mined, and in all honesty, title update 5 will probably be the last one. But honestly, like they've been adding enough content with each of these that doesn't really matter. Like it's like semantics. But yeah, gonna be interested to see how I enjoy title update 3 and the rest of them beyond that. when I get the time to. Holy shit, the RPG backlog is real.
Oh, that's bad. It's bad.
Sorry that we're like banging that into the earth, but it's how we genuinely feel.
I really, really want to play Harvestella, but I'm dreading the fact that everyone that's played it says it's like at least 60 hours long.
I never got back to Stranger of Paradise, and I feel bad.
It's okay. After the DLC, I don't think anyone's going to be banging the drum for that on the Game of the Year list.
I'm sorry to break it to you, James, but Astilibra is also probably over 60 hours long.
I know, but I have to play that one because like both you and Josh are beating the drum about it, and I need to be able to be part of that conversation.
Adam and Josh. Do you remember the DioField Chronicle?
DioField Sweep!
That was a game. The DioField Chronicle is going to get a free update in March of 2023. So a few months away. Did anyone call this?
No, but I love it. This is great. This is fantastic.
So so DioField Chronicle is going to get a free update in March. It's going to feature a new scenario, and based on the trailer, it's seemingly like based around Walter Quinn, who has kind of a very key. It's
not just based on the trailer. Like the update literally says it's a Walter Quinn scenario. Like, okay,
Yeah,
I gotcha.
She's like the main character in this.
And if you play the game, that makes sense.
Yeah. It basically shows Walter Quinn's side of the story because there's a lot of points where like you don't really know what she's been going through. So this additional scenario surfaces all of that, and it drastically changes up like the way you play the game in the sense that like it seems like you only play as Walter Quinn, but she's like a summoner necromancer. So your gameplay now is like summoning like a fucking army in fucking battles, and it fucking looks wild.
And then they're adding a new difficulty mode. They're also adding like an extra mode where additional high level enemies appear. That's somewhat different from the very hard mode. And I know one of the main criticisms of this game is that even on the hard difficulty, it was pretty easy to like not cheese, but like once you found a strategy that worked, you just did that all the time. So I think some people who like are big into technical RPGs and didn't enjoy this game because it was just too breezy, will have an additional difficulty mode that they can select from. So yeah, this is kind of out of nowhere, not a surprise. I really thought that DioField Chronicle was going to be like, oh yeah, it's also free. I really thought DioField Chronicle would be a one and done, which is kind of like, there's something quaint about games that are just like, here it is, and it is what it is. But like, nope, this game will get another update next year. So weren't expecting it.
I cannot wait to commit war crimes even harder.
Maybe they'll release a DLC after like. Oh, I shouldn't say that. It's a spoiler. Never mind.
I know what you're going to say though. I get it.
Oh, but you can just leave. I like that.
Did the gameplay loop change for you guys? I remember you guys keep spamming this one skill and I watch you guys play.
Well, no. The thing with the game is the thing I enjoyed about it was you sort of find like an engine of skills that like synergize well, and you're kind of like min-maxing, like, aha, this combination of skills synergizes so well I can blow away anything.
Yeah, like everyone is gonna find their own like variant of like everyone's gonna like find their own like combination of skills that like fucking just kills everything on screen. That's basically what you're working towards too. The way that the strategies that people find for themselves will be pretty different from person to person. Like a lot of people who like to stick like their base party will really like assassinate a lot. Because like that assassinate skill on like the main character really fucking good and continues to be fucking good throughout the whole entire game. But like there'll be some people that like are more crafty and like just find a way to like group enemies together and like fucking kill everything on screen after that grouping. And like that's not even like that's just like one variant of it, you know. So like your strategies like change over time, but like your end result is kind of the same of like, okay, I found like my skill chain setup to like kill everything on screen.
I see.
Yeah, that was a game that I feel like our impressions as a group here was seemingly more positive than average. But you know, that's how opinions work. So it's good to have that. It'd be interesting to see like if this ends up addressing some of the issues that some people had with the original game being too easy. And just having a side story and some additional options just can't hurt as well. A couple other trailers for some upcoming games. We got another gameplay trailer for the upcoming Wild Hearts, focused primarily on the Karakuri mechanic, which is the like quick building nature magic mechanisms that we've seen used in like the gameplay trailer and the reveal trailer. So this whole gameplay trailer focuses on like the weapons that you can build, the walls, the shields, the updrafts of sorts that allow you to like gain altitude. So basically it's all around that gameplay mechanic, which I think this is kind of a good thing to highlight because it's kind of very clearly something that this game is incorporating into its gameplay style that isn't found in the other monster hunting contemporary video games. So that's kind of neat. And then additionally, there is, I believe this was revealed on this trailer, a giant porcupine monster, which is really, really cute.
I like it. Just giant porcupine.
I found it cute. I'm like, I don't know. It seems pretty deadly and would hurt if you tried to touch it.
Is it given a name?
I wonder how thick the quills are. You know, just
probably. Adam, do you know if it was given a name?
I don't know.
The reason why I was wondering is because like the boar is King Tusk. Right? I was like, I wonder if this is like Queen Quill or something. I don't know. So.
The trailer is made for Fortnite fans, you know. That's why they had to release this kind of trailer. It's like, all right.
Mm-hmm. And then it is also going to get another trailer at the Game Awards of some sort, which I guess we'll talk about very briefly later, probably at the very end of this podcast. So if that's your thing. We also got another gameplay trailer for another upcoming RPG that doesn't have a release date yet, and that is Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. In case there are too many Warhammer video games that you can't keep them straight, like me, this is the one that's being developed by Owlcat Games, who made the two Pathfinder CRPGs. So this is a gameplay trailer that it's a CRPG, so a lot of the gameplay is kind of rote and well-worn. But one thing that, as someone who has played and enjoyed the Pathfinder games, when I look at this gameplay trailer, I'm like, man, Owlcat makes some pretty beautiful CRPGs. I really enjoy the lighting and the art style from this studio. And it's interesting to see it in a Warhammer environment rather than just like the general fantasy setting of Pathfinder.
Yeah, Owlcat's really good at just like environmental design.
They just make really high production value games, but still CRPGs, which are almost occasionally associated with being lower budget. So it's kind of cool to see both Owlcat doing that, and then of course Larian with Baldur's Gate 3, which
Baldur's Gate 3 is a sneaky title. Like I feel they announced that. I don't think we reported on it. They sort of announced an announcement like they're going to have a stream about it. They might give it a release date, next year, and it could be a, I think it being in the early access, people almost like forget about it.
I played that. Like it's one of those things where it's like I feel like I played Baldur's Gate 3 forever ago because it was like years ago. It's not out yet, and I'm like, all right, they're gonna have their updates, and it's gonna get a real release date. It's gonna be a real boy at some time, and like I am looking forward to that. But it's just one of those things where I'm just waiting for release at this point. So, and then like speaking of like I'm also interested in the fact that Owlcat has really supported Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. It's getting that second DLC pack. I'm like, all right, so similar to kind of like Monster Hunter Rise, like I'll wait for all the added content to be put in, and then maybe I'll poke at it again. But yeah, Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, this will be my, I am definitely planning on playing this. It'll be my first and only foray into Warhammer of any sort, which I know literally nothing about. But hey, I knew literally nothing about Pentiment setting either and ended up really enjoying it. So good precedent there. And then also speaking of some upcoming announcements, we got some news that the sequel to Fuga, Melodies of Steel, will be re-revealed early next year in January and will also be given a release date at the same time. James, was there any additional context about this Fuga 2 news?
So basically, it wasn't something that was announced when I reported on it. It was just the president of CyberConnect 2 has this sort of like Famitsu column that he's been doing about Fuga's development for a while now, and the most recent one went up. So I read it because I was interested. And basically, he was just like, oh, yeah, so I said that we were going to have more Fuga news in the fall. It's already halfway through November, to the point where you'd be forgiven for saying it's almost winter. So anyways, that information about Fuga 2 is delayed until January. But here's some other information I can share right now. In which case it was like, okay, so when we kind of re-reveal or show off the sequel in January, they'll have the release date. And he also said that part of the reason why it's taken so long for more information is that instead of just taking all the feedback from Fuga 1 and implementing it in Fuga 2, they've also been working on a patch for Fuga 1 that kind of some of the quality of life and balance changes that they've made for Fuga 2 they're patching into Fuga 1 as well. Basically taking the lessons they've learned while from the feedback and developing Fuga 2 and being like, well, when you really think about it, it makes sense to add that to Fuga 1 as well. Because by his own words, it's like, well, there's some people that maybe could have enjoyed Fuga 1, but some of these issues drove them away. And it's like, it doesn't make sense if we want to have retention and get people to try both Fuga 1 and then go on to Fuga 2. If we just address those complaints in Fuga 2, it would make much more sense to have them addressed in both. That way, anyone else that starts up the series and wants to try it out, they're getting the best possible experience from the word go.
Right. Now you can have the balance patch of Boron counting as 2 for soul cannon shots.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And the way he explains it in Japanese, of course, makes a lot of sense. It's you don't really think about it, but especially for a studio like CyberConnect 2, and when it's their self-publishing, they want to get as many people to play it as possible. It makes a lot of sense. So, yeah.
All the remaining headlines that we have here are all based around release dates. So we will just kind of rattle through these. And I think I have these in chronological order. We'll see if that holds true. Soccer Story is going to basically be releasing on everything on November 29th. James, you wrote in this article everywhere except Google Stadia because it's already out on Google Stadia.
But no, it was announced for Google Stadia, but that was before the game came out, obviously. And now that Stadia is shutting down, they're like, we previously announced this is coming to Google Stadia. Please ignore that announcement.
The way James worded it, I made it sound like it was out on Google Stadia too. I had to read it again.
I was literally using their own words because I thought it was funny.
They were just poking fun at it. Yeah. It's coming out except for Google Stadia, because that's true for a lot of games that come out on everything but Google Stadia. But the reason why it's notable here is because it was announced for it. And
gotcha. But yeah,
they were just like, I guess not.
Yeah.
So yeah, Soccer Story, that little indie RPG based around football, soccer, and coming out by the end of the month.
Sorry, it's called. It's not called Football Story. It's called Soccer Story.
Good point. All right, Soccer Story. The Football Story will be next year. What was the other game that these developers made? Wasn't that
you might be thinking of Sports Story and Golf Story, which are different.
Oh, which is not from the same people as Soccer Story. Okay,
Soccer Story is different.
Okay, I'm glad you're around to help me keep this straight. Okay. Broken Lines is releasing on consoles, PlayStation, Xbox on December 14th. This is like a World War, is it 2 CRPG? Yeah, World War 2 or tactical RPG. It released a few years ago on PC, but will be coming to consoles. Oh, it also released, I didn't realize it also released on Switch in 2020. So it released on Switch and PC in 2020. And then in December, it will be releasing for PlayStation 4 and 5 and Xbox One and Xbox Series. Also in December, NetEase announced a new game, which is Cygnus Enterprises, which is like an RPG city management sim that is releasing in early access on PC.
It sounds like a modern take on like an ActRaiser or something. So obviously not similar to ActRaiser, but like in terms of its style, but like there's like an RPG half and like a city building half. So but the RPG half is like a top-down like action isometric sort of thing. But yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere. It was announced during like the PC Gamer stream this week, and it's coming in early access like in a month. So I haven't really looked into it too much, to be honest. Like, oh, it's okay. It's like a half RPG, half city builder from NetEase. So this is one of those games where like we've talked about how NetEase is sort of moving into more console and PC games rather than mobile, which is what they've done a lot of. Well, I guess here's one of them. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's cool, but it's early access, so
it's hard. It's sort of hard to get a grasp on it without like playing it, I think.
Yeah. Also, you broke your chronological order thing.
Oh, I did.
It's over. Yeah, you skipped one.
Oh, it's over.
Oh, I skipped. I remember we talked about where is this? The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Complete Edition. This is the long-awaited next gen, even though we're 2 years into the gen, update will be releasing on December 14th. And this includes, I believe, a free update to the PC version. This is basically a PC version of the complete edition will launch at the same time. The complete edition will basically include all the free DLCs. Those are like the items and the little tiny additions. And then as well as the 2 expansions, Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine. Basically, there'll be a free update if you already own the game. A physical release for the complete edition will be available later. So I don't know like how many people have been waiting for this, but it's been something that has been like on their list for a while. So it's kind of nice to finally have a release date.
I guess it's worth mentioning for PC players who are playing with mods on PC right now. You might want to turn auto updates off if you want to continue playing that mod, because this update might probably break mod support for a while.
I guess that's one thing I'm not sure of. So like it says the complete edition will get a PC version, but will current PC versions automatically update to complete edition,
Yeah,
or will be
they
separate
said-
SKUs?
It depends. If you bought it on GOG and you downloaded the non-Galaxy version, it's not going to auto update because it doesn't connect at all.
Yeah.
But if you bought it and you're using GOG Galaxy, or you're using the Steam version, then it will probably auto update.
But I'm also sort of curious about like
I
if you
believe though that if you bought it on Steam, you can still get it on GOG for free. And I think then, so you'll still have access to the original version if you want to download it. It's just like, it'll probably auto update. Yeah.
But I'm also sort of curious, like if you have the PC version, like you bought it, and let's just say you never bought the DLC, can you even do that, or is the DLC always included now? I'm sort of curious, like if you bought the PC version and then it's like updates, do they just give you the DLC now? I'm not sure, but it's probably been cheap several times. I don't know.
Sorry, I was quickly looking at the PC version. It looks like you can get there's the base version, and then there's the Game of the Year edition, which includes the DLC.
So I'm wondering, like, if you own the base version and it like updates, you might get like the game update, but they're not going to throw in the DLCs that if you haven't bought them already, right? Like, or will they? I don't know.
Yeah,
that's a good question. Sure.
Yeah, that's kind of a very niche scenario where it's like,
yeah, if you bought the game but not the DLCs,
I'm sure they've accounted for that, where they're not going to let you like swindle them in such a way. And I know the game has been on very deep discounts several times.
It's also sold like what 30 million copies. So
Something
I don't
like that.
I think something tells me that they don't really care too much if a few people that somehow didn't buy the DLC now get the DLC.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm really curious to see how ray tracing will look like in this game with this update.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that I'm looking at the release date. I'm like 2015. Damn, that was a long time ago. On the Steam release date for it. Yep. All right, so going into that was my last comment on Witcher. Any other comments on Witcher? Nope. All right.
I wonder if this next gen update's going to make it look as good as the original PC trailer before they had to downgrade it for consoles.
The dream. So going into
that would be funny.
Going into releases for next year, this is not a release, but it's the date of a network test. This is going to be a deep cut for a few people that have been waiting a long time for this. Several years ago, Bandai Namco announced, I don't remember if they announced it as an online action game or an MMO, but they announced Blue Protocol. And I remember a lot of people were really invested in this game and really interested. And even I remember watching some of the early streams of that game, but then it went quiet. And I ended up kind of like slipping my radar. I haven't thought about it in a long time. But Bandai Namco and Bandai Namco Online have announced that Blue Protocol will launch in spring of 2023 in Japan. And then a network test will be conducted in January from the 14th to the 16th. So
yeah, they also had a recent stream, showing off what the game is looking like. And during that stream, they also mentioned that Blue Protocol will also be showing up at the Game Awards. They'll have like a special update on the game at the Game Awards. So this will not be Japanese exclusive for anyone who is worried about that. So we'll maybe get like a release date or a release time frame for the global release. For this game. It's also one of those games that's like a really, really in-depth customization, create a character type of stuff. So I'm really interested to see how the final product looks like when it launches. It's always very tricky to release a modern MMO these days, especially if you're not like one of the big ones.
Right.
So, but but this has been getting like a lot, like a pretty considerable following, like just not even Japan, just like globally, like a lot of people have been clamoring for it. So, best of luck.
I didn't realize it was going to show up at the Game Awards, but yeah, very clearly an indication that it's going to get some Western details. Whether it's going to be a worldwide release on the same date or offset in a way, we'll see. So,
Yeah.
and here's one that basically, if this almost feels like a Mad Lib announcement or like an AI generated headline. So that is 2009 action RPG Risen from Piranha Bytes will re-release on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch on January 24th of next year. So it's like, wait,
Yeah.
what?
Yep.
All right. Well,
someone on our
hopefully-
Twitter feed was like, "What?" And I even responded to them like, "Yeah, that's what I thought when I saw this." Because Risen, from what I understand, I haven't played it. It has the Piranha Bytes sort of jank to it, but also charm to it. Like maybe not like a great game by some rubric, but has its strengths and faults and like charm. But like I don't think anyone was expecting or wanting or hoping or even thinking this was possible that it's just going to get a modern or a console port. And also, I guess the PC version is old enough. It never had controller support, and now they're adding it finally.
Yeah.
Like,
That's that's
So,
crazy to think
yeah,
about.
like,
It's funny
okay.
reading the press release of this because they referred it as the cult RPG multiple times, and
Yeah.
they always like say that there's going to be no loading screens, fully seamless roll. It's just like it's like a bullet point. It's like no loading screens. Like holy shit. So
I love
it's kind
cult
of
RPGs.
Right
Are
now,
you a
like
fan of
I'm
cult
happy.
RPGs?
me. I love the cult RPG.
Yeah, this is just its own genre. But I right now, it feels like forever ago, even though it was only a handful of months ago. I really feel burned by like Elex 2. So like Elex 1, I basically also these are the reason why I bring these games up is because they're also from developer Piranha Bytes. Like I thought was very similar. Like, yeah, it's got jank, but it has some really smart ideas and a lot of good things going for it. Where like Elex 2, I thought was really, really bad. Just not good. I couldn't see past it. And then I'm looking at like, okay, what is the Steam reviews on Risen? 89% positive across its lifetime. That's pretty good. Metacritic 77. All right, maybe a diamond in the rough. And then I'm looking at Elex 2 on Steam and it's like 74% positive. What in the world? Like, I don't know. But like, all right.
I'm gonna say that need to see the Digital Foundry for the performance on this on PS4, Xbox One, and Switch.
Switch is an
Really-
interesting choice. Like, who like a Switch
crossing my
owner
fingers.
waiting for the Risen port, just being like,
Me.
yes, hell yeah.
Crossing my fingers that this 2009 game can run well on those platforms.
Has it ever run well? I don't know. But Risen, I really don't know like what the reception was for like people that are like into the Eurojank stuff. If I play this game, it's going to be like from like an academic standpoint, like sure, let me see what this 2009 RPG is like just to experience it. It's out of nowhere, but I still appreciate it. Like why not? Let's do it. Another January release is we talked about this game back in the late summer, and that is Superfuse, which is an isometric superhero RPG with like a comic book art style. It will launch in early access on January 31st. So right now, this game has only been announced for Steam, for PC. We've only got the early access release date, and right now, no indication that it has a planned console release yet.
Yeah, this game's like it's kind of been like in the background, like, but it's one of those things that I would like to try out. I don't remember if it was like when you first heard about it, I didn't know if it was going to go to early access or just to a full release.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems pretty neat.
I do like Adam's general like mindset for covering early access games is like we will cover when they go into early access, but at that point, like it's kind of like we can't stay up to date on all early access updates. We would just be swarmed. So we'll probably hear from this game again on an official, RPG site news post once it goes to full release, which sometimes is only a few months away, and sometimes it feels like it never comes. But yeah, Superfuse.
Hopefully this one comes out before the end of 2023, like fully.
Mm-hmm. And then, go ahead, James.
I was just gonna say randomly, just reminds me of how at like E3 2015 I saw Mountain Blade Bannerlord 2 like beyond like behind closed doors, and then that didn't even come out in early access until like 4 or 5 years later, and it's just now come out fully.
I
That was like
swore
actual gameplay they showed.
I remember so our site has never really covered like the Mountain Blade series very well. We just don't have anyone on site that has an inherent interest in it. Well, I think Kite plays it a lot, but doesn't write a lot of review features. I remember back in like 2019, Alex was like, "We should cover this," and I thought the game had released, and then that's like Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord came out on the 25th of October, like less than a month ago. Like, really? I feel like people have been playing this game for years, and that's because they have been. But
it's
yeah,
like,
I guess
it was
it's
like a wait and a half because it got announced. It was like a wait and a half for it to come out in early access, and then it's like, oh yeah, by the way, even though we announced it like 5 years ago, it's only early access now, and it's just now come out. Just crazy.
160,000 reviews on Steam.
Yeah, Mountain Blade is one of those games where it's easy to underestimate how popular it is because it's only on PC. So it's like,
but it's got its audience there. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like a lot of those PC only games, you just, unless you're like peeking around those like PC only spaces, it's really hard to tell when something's super popular or not.
33,000 in game.
Probably one of the biggest games of the year.
And then the last release date that we have here is another February release. And that is a Switch port for Tyrant's Blessing, which is, I believe this was an indie like tactical, like very, very FFT like tactical.
It was like, yeah, it's sort of like Into the Breach esque. I played like a demo for this on Steam. Unfortunately, like I didn't quite enjoy my time with it in that Steam demo because like there's like this mechanic in it where like you're fighting these like undead creatures like zombies, and like they have this inherent like system mechanic where they would like keep on rezzing themselves up until a certain point. Like they have like this energy, and like once you deplete that energy, then they'll stop rezzing. So it kind of made fights tedious in it. But you know,
I remember you saying that now.
Yeah, like I haven't really kept up with the game ever since like it fully released. I don't know if they've tweaked that or made that less tedious. You know, but you know, for people who enjoy it, more power to them. You know, I just didn't enjoy my time with that demo version.
And then the last bit here are two things just to kind of look forward to. One at the end of this year and one early next year. We mentioned it. People have different levels of investment in this, but the Game Awards is set up for December 8th of this year. Just because we're always kind of interested in what RPGs are being nominated for these large-scale awards. The 5 games that were nominated for the Game Awards RPG of 2022 were Elden Ring, Pokemon Legends Arceus, Triangle Strategy, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and Live Alive. And
that's 6 games?
Is that 6 games?
Yeah, because I know that 5 of the 6 are published by Nintendo.
It's 6 games for the is
RPG.
it 6?
No, in the best role playing category and like on like the site, it has 5 games. I don't know where the 6 come from, but like for the best role playing game category on the Game Awards site, it's Elden Ring, Live Alive, Pokemon Legends Arceus, Triangle Strategy, and Xenoblade 3.
Okay.
We can count.
So, well, it's 4 or 5. James is correct. It's just 4 or 5, not 5 or 6.
Yeah,
so,
in the actual big game of the year category, it has 6 games on the site. Like, and for RPGs there's Elden Ring, there's Horizon Forbidden West, and Xenoblade 3 are the 3 RPGs that are representing like for the big game of the year category. But for a lot of these categories, you see a lot of Elden Ring and Horizon Forbidden West on them. I'm kind of just like scrolling real fast to see if there are any other like RPGs.
And when I think of the RPG nominations, like when we're talking about like a broad audience, I think they're pretty good. Like Elden Ring is obviously done very, very well critically and commercially. Xenoblade 3 is probably the biggest like Japanese RPG of the year. Pokemon Arceus has sold obviously bigger than Xenoblade. Yeah, like if you're talking about that, but it's its own thing. It's
was well loved.
it's a paradigm shift for Pokemon. We think it did really well. Live Alive, obviously a classic, finally available in English.
Live Alive, I think, is the to stop you there. That's the one that I look at this list and like, oh, that's neat that Live Alive got announced for
it's
RPG
cool.
of the Year at a big website. I think its chances of winning are incredibly slim. Or it's almost kind of there as like a respectful nod. But
I think that strategy is a rock solid game. It's probably the weakest of the nominations. But when I think about like what would I nominate instead, like if I were to replace it, the only other thing that comes to mind is maybe Trails from Zero, because that's obviously well loved. It's a little bit more niche. But otherwise, I think those 5 picks are pretty solid.
For just
for
like
RPGs.
general encompassing,
Like obviously, like you might really love Star Ocean, and it might just sing to you. But when considering this is like this is a broad audience award.
It's a broad audience, but Western slanted probably. So I know some people were just happy to see Xenoblade Chronicles 3 nominated.
I'd be surprised if Elden Ring doesn't win.
I forget the details, but like I remember people had like a real beef because 2 wasn't nominated the year it came out because it was a December release and then it was ignored the next year. And people were like, but it's, do these matter in the long run? They really don't. But it is still kind of cool just to like say, yes, it's neat that Live Alive got nominated for a big stage award like this, even if it doesn't really have a chance of winning. At that point, that's kind of beside the fact.
It's like it's neat that got nominated. It won't matter in the sense that we all know that Elden Ring is gonna be a sweeper this year.
Well, I could see potentially. I could see potentially if Elden Ring gets Game of the Year, they could then nod something else for RPG of the Year, potentially. So it'd be interesting to see that.
Or they get Elden Ring RPG of the Year and they give God of War Game of the Year.
Yeah, something like that as well. They've done something like that before, which I think is fair. Just to kind of
some other RPGs here at the other categories as well. I still need to get around to this. I don't know if I wish I could get around this game, but Citizen Sleeper. Games for Impact. That's there. I've heard a lot of great things about it. I haven't had time to get around to it. Best ongoing has Destiny 2, FF14, and Genshin Impact for RPG representation there. So a lot of for best ongoing. Best mobile game, Genshin Impact once again, and then Tower of Fantasy, Diablo Immortal for RPGs also on there. Best community support, Destiny 2 and FF14 there. Let's see. I know there's some other RPGs here, but yeah, I mean, it like just for this year, just really like good showing of RPGs all around.
I looked for indie games to see if any of the indie games were like RPG slanted. The one that we could have covered probably, but didn't, was Tunic as a best indie game. That's more of a Zelda-like, as far as I know, than an RPG, but we kind of conflate the two deliberately on purpose. So,
yeah,
James talked about it on the podcast. So.
Yeah,
that's right.
Wrote about it, and then I was like, I'm not sure.
I probably could have
done some. I probably could have done something about it because I remember I reviewed Death's Door, which was similar enough. So I don't know.
Most anticipated game is almost all RPGs. It's FF16, Hogwarts Legacy, Resident Evil 4 is on there as the only non-RPG, Starfield, and Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. So, yeah.
All those games are totally coming out next year. Actually, I think all those games are probably going to come out next year. Game Awards does better at most anticipated games than RPG Site.
I think the game that has like the most the one that might slip into 2024 Starfield. That's what I think. But everything else I think will come out next year.
And then this is more of a specific thing to look forward to, but we have Granblue Fantasy Fes, as we do. I believe that's every year, right? So
it's every year,
but it's in January this year. Is that typical?
No, it's usually in December.
It's usually in December because that's when like they announce like the new the Zodiac in Granblue every time. And they'll show a bunch of announcements like gameplay changes.
And that's when we've gotten our yearly update on Relink.
Yeah, and the whole year is silent except for when that event shows up.
Yeah, Relink is apparently playable in the event, so you can.
Yeah, that's the big news here. Is that Granblue Fantasy Fes? Will we see more or get more details on Granblue Fantasy Relink? It's been a few years since we've gotten some real concrete details, other than like very very quick look-ins or updates. Apparently, at Granblue Fantasy Fest 2022-2023, occurring in late January, Granblue Fantasy Relink will be playable by the public for the first time. So that's obviously for people that have been anticipating this game for a while. That is a very good, promising sign.
Do you think we'll finally get a release date, Chow?
No.
Dang.
But I feel like the mobile game is like setting up for like an end of service kind of storyline right now. I am feeling scared. Like, there's a lot of shit that's happening in the story that's really wild, and I was like, "Oh my god, are they really setting up for the end or something?" I don't know.
I mean,
A lot of mobile games have been going out
sure.
end of service.
I wouldn't be so sure, except for the fact that apparent, from what I understand, Granblue's entire like rating scene is like dependent on Twitter. So,
well, it's gonna be dead. I mean, maybe I don't know. Elon Musk has killed Twitter, right? Is that what the news out there is?
I mean, that's it's getting wild out there. Nothing's like officially like it's looking bad, but we'll see.
But the problem with Granblue is like people put their codes out with Twitter, and there's like a search engine that uses Twitter to find these codes to help you join raids. So if Twitter's down, then how's Granblue's gonna function?
Yeah, that's kind of the weird ripple effect, right? Because like Granblue is like one of those games that like that a certain portion of that game does not operate if like a major social media service goes down, because it's.
So I'm not saying like Twitter is for sure going to die, but there's a lot of like websites that you can log in with Twitter. Like what happened to that? There's a lot of things that like Twitter is connected to that would be problematic if it just did die.
Right. I believe, I don't know where I saw this, but I saw some hubbub about like PSN backend stuff of like people data mining that there might be a Granblue Relink demo at the PSN backend. So just take that with a grain of salt. That's just like some hubbub I heard.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time where it's like this is playable by a public at an event, and they get like the first hands-on, and then that same demo is made digitally available, worldwide, or at least in Japan.
It's like the Final Fantasy VII demo. It's like, oh yeah, it's like they have like this big announcement at the show, and then demo like an hour later or something like that. Yeah. I could see it happening.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see if this game is a thing, if it exists next year. I don't know. It's a myth. One of the longest RPG myths.
Like Wukong, the Black Myth? Is that what's called?
Yeah.
Is it real? Is it a myth?
That's another one I haven't seen in a while. And here we are approaching the 3-hour mark, and that covers all the headlines that I had for the year. So November is quickly wrapping up. We had a ton of games to talk about this week. Thank you, basically everyone here, including Chow, getting in the Astilibra section, unplanned and unprompted. But yeah, so
random talk.
Yeah, so lots of great games coming out. Scarlet and Violet doing some really fun things, even if we are a little bit disappointed at the technical proficiency of that one. Interesting things from Midnight Suns, a smaller title, Pentiment, Monochrome Mobius. Talked last week about, of course, Tactics Ogre and all the other games that we're trying to wrap up with it before the end of the year. We've got those reviews up on the site for Pentiment and Tactics Ogre Reborn. James has his Monster Hunter feature as well, along with the news for the Update 3, including all the headlines and release dates upcoming into the end of this year and into early next year. You can find RPG site up on all the social media platforms, Twitter for now, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. We do have a Discord channel, discord.gg/RPG site. Obviously, if you enjoy following us and hearing from us, we encourage that you join that just in case.
Join the discussion. We have discussion forums now for a bunch of recent RPGs. It seems to be going well so far, and
it's been a good experiment.
Very good function.
Because before we would make different like community tabs for different channels, and they would be active like when games were first released. But now we're going to try these little discussion forums that Discord has added and see how those work. But yeah, go ahead and discord.gg/RPG site if you are at all inclined.
Got a lot of people coming in, a lot of newcomers.
Yeah. It's been a time. And then, of course, if you made it to the end of this podcast, here we are at the 3-hour mark, go ahead and leave us a rating, a review, a comment. We love hearing from those. We've been seeing them more often now, and it's been really cool to see what you guys think, whether you agree with us on certain things or whether you disagree with us. We'll take that as well. Let us know what we're doing okay and what we can work on. And then, as of right now, at least I am planning to have a podcast next week. Of course, I do know it'll be the Saturday after Thanksgiving for those of us in the United States. So it might have a slightly shorter format or a smaller number of us up on the cast. If we do decide to not have a podcast next week, we will let you know on our social channels to the best that we can. But until you hear from us next time, whether that is next week or later, stay safe and take care. And we will talk to you then.
DioField
Later, everyone.
DioField.